I'd like to call this meeting back to order for the afternoon of May 8th. Sacramento County Board of Supervisors.
Okay, I'm going to take the roll. Supervisors Frost. Here. Kennedy.
Here.
Natoli.
Here.
Cerna.
Here.
Peters.
Here.
And you have a quorum. So for our item, we are bringing back item 46 from this morning. This is the public hearing on the benefit category change and levy of increased service charges for the Verona subdivision within Zone 1 of County Service Area Number 1.
Good afternoon, Bob Davison, County Engineering again. Since this morning's hearing, the property owner, Lily Valenzuela, has withdrawn her ballot, and she has submitted a new ballot. That's sealed, and the clerk has that ballot. So I would ask your board to direct the clerk to tabulate the newly submitted ballot.
We don't have to take any action here to approve the withdrawal and enter the new ballot?
No, we've asked her to mark the prior ballot canceled.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right, then. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Okay, and I do have the ballot, and she is withdrawing. Ms. Valenzuela is withdrawing that, so I'm going to open the new ballot.
Suspense is killing.
If it comes up no, we know she really meant it.
This is the legal owner of Woodside. The site address is 9065, 9053, 9035, and 9027 Calvine Road. And we have a vote in favor, and it does represent 100% of the benefit category change with 0% opposed.
Okay, so with that statement, I recommend that since there is no majority protest, your board may adopt today's resolution with extra information that has just been read in by the clerk.
Okay, Mr. Kennedy.
So moved.
Okay.
Second, please vote.
Unanimous vote.
Okay, congratulations.
You avoided a disaster.
Okay.
Okay, item 52 is an ordinance to amend the Sacramento County Design Guidelines and Sacramento County Zoning Code related to the design review program. This is a request to amend the design guidelines relating to commercial drive-throughs and the Sacramento County Zoning Code relating to the administration of the design review program. The environmental document is exempt.
Good afternoon, Chair Peters, members of the board, Chris Pahuli with Planning and Environmental Review. I do have a PowerPoint presentation for you. The item before you is an ordinance amending both the Sacramento County Zoning Code and the Sacramento County-wide design guidelines. The goal of these amendments is twofold. One, to provide design guidance related to commercial buildings, and two, to clarify the administration of the design review program in the zoning code. I should note that earlier this year, the Planning Commission adopted a resolution of intention for these amendments, and on March 12th, 2018, they considered these amendments and unanimously recommended the board adopt the ordinance which is before you for consideration. I'll first review the proposed amendments to the design guidelines. These amendments are primarily a response to a large number of design review applications for fast food restaurants, where there has been some concerns voiced about the quality of the design. The amendments clarify design expectations. They include language providing direction for better screening of drive-throughs. Additionally, language is incorporated to ensure better design for commercial facades and quality and variety of building materials. The intent of the guideline amendments is to steer applicants away from blank walls with limited architecture or single material treatment. Next, I'll review the proposed amendments to the zoning code. Despite some major formatting changes, the content of this section has largely remained the same. However, there are some changes which are intended to clarify the administration of the design review program. The first item to note is the amendment does contain language to clearly describe the types of projects that require a design review. The amendment clarifies the triggers for design review for lot divisions and proposes that entitlements such as community plan amendments, where there is little building or landscape design proposals, those will no longer require a design review. The second item to note is that the amendment provides direction to determine the level of design review required. Planning's fee schedule includes various levels of design review for non-discretionary design review or non-discretionary projects. Staff utilizes the design review applicant guide to determine the level of design review, and that applicant guide is included in your staff report package. The amendment includes language to codify this criteria used in the applicant guide. Unlike non-discretionary design reviews, there's currently only one fee for discretionary design review. This amendment reflects the premise that discretionary projects require a varying amount of design review depending on the project scope. Therefore, staff developed similar criteria to determine the level of review for discretionary projects. Staff anticipates that the board will adopt the fee for these discretionary design reviews when you hear the fee schedule in the near future. The next amendment is related to including a mechanism for waiving the requirement for design review in select instances where it may be appropriate. Previously, there was no mechanism to waive the requirement when perhaps no design review was required. Or necessary, I should say. For example, an application for a conditional use permit where only interior improvements are proposed if the existing building met county code requirements. The amendment proposes language which will allow design review to be waived if certain findings can be made by the planning director. The fourth item to note is the amendment clarifies the authority to complete a design review and make a determination of compliance. For non-discretionary design reviews, the design review administrator makes a determination of compliance with the design guidelines. However, for discretionary projects, the final hearing authority makes the determination of compliance. The zoning code authorizes the planning commission and the board to make this determination, but is silent on projects heard by the subdivision review committee and the zoning administrator. This amendment clarifies that the SRC and the ZA make these determinations when considering requests. Finally, this amendment establishes the lapse of determination of guideline compliance. For other types of entitlements, permits, and approvals, the zoning code prescribes a time period of 3 years in which if the approval is not used for its purpose, it becomes void. This amendment includes the same time period of 3 years for design review recommendations. Staff is recommending the board recognize the amendments as exempt under the CEQA guidelines and approve the ordinance amending the design guidelines and the zoning code. Should the board approve the ordinance, the changes will be in effect in 30 days. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Pahuli? No? I do have a speaker signed up. Monica Kirkland.
I think she's on the next defense.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's
Yeah.
53.
Yeah.
I'm looking at 53 here, and it's actually 52. Getting too many.
Want me?
No, not yet, sorry, you can be seated. Are there any speakers on item 52? Okay. Got that?
Move for approval.
Second, please vote.
Unanimous vote. Item 53 is the zoning code amendments round 1. Request to amend the zoning code with cleanup amendments related to chapter 3, 5, 6, and 7. The environmental document is exempt.
Good afternoon. I'm Surinder Singh, Principal Planner with the Planning and Environmental Review Division, and I do have a PowerPoint presentation for today's item. Okay, the item before you today is a zoning code cleanup amendment package. As part of this cleanup amendment, staff is proposing several amendments to standards and also information that we have in our zoning code. And the intent of this amendment is to clarify and refine existing standards that are contained in the zoning code. We also would like to address information that were omitted during the comprehensive zoning code update, which was adopted in 2015. And we also like to discuss new standards that we're proposing for car washes. This is based upon direction that we got from your board during the last zoning code cleanup amendment hearing, which was conducted in November of last year. So we do have new standards that we're proposing for car washes. As required by the zoning code, a resolution of intention was adopted by the Planning Commission in November of 2017 to initiate an amendment to the zoning code. So with that introduction, I will briefly summarize all the amendments that we're proposing as part of this zoning code cleanup package. In terms of the cleanup work that we're proposing, staff is recommending the following amendments. We're recommending new building setback requirements for residential lots that are located on private roads. There are no standards currently in place in the zoning code. There are standards that provide directions for building setback for residential lots that front on public road, but not on private roads. So we are proposing standards for those residential lots. In addition to that, we're also proposing additional findings that can be used by staff when evaluating requests for certificate of non-conforming uses. So that these are new findings that we're recommending be included in the zoning code. We have also recommending revised findings for the consideration of institutional uses in the ag and also ag-res zone area. Based upon the proposed amendment, institutional uses can be considered via a use permit process if the proposed use is located either along a major roadway, a continuation of an existing use, or if it's similar in scale with other uses of the surrounding community. Staff is also proposing an amendment to the fencing section of the zoning code. There is quite a bit of confusion in regards to standards that we have in the zoning code relating to fencing. Fencing requirements were discussed during the comprehensive zoning code update in 2015, but we believe that the requirements that were discussed back in 2015 was not adequately addressed in the new zoning code. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through this exhibit right now. So based upon the old zoning code, this is the zoning code that was in place up to 2015, the year 2015. That code requires an up to 6-foot solid fence to be located within the front yard area. So basically what that means is that a 6-foot fence could be located within the front yard of a residential property, and this would be measured from the edge of the right-of-way, which is where the sidewalk is, all the way back to the front of the house. So if you have a residential unit that is located 100 feet away from the sidewalk, then there is an opportunity for the property owner to construct a 6-foot fence all the way from the edge of the sidewalk to the edge of the building. So we looked at the records that were prepared for the zoning code update, and there was some mention of reducing the height of the fence within the required setback area. But we don't think that that information was transmitted accurately in the new zoning code. Sorry, you had a question.
Supervisor Cerna?
Yeah, real quick question about the exhibit and what you just mentioned. The exhibit shows, it says roadway, but the right edge of the blue rectangle there, that's the back of sidewalk?
Correct.
So that's a right-of-way, not just roadway?
Correct.
Okay, I'll make sure. Thanks.
Because the setback is measured from the edge of the right-of-way, which is usually at the back of the sidewalk.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So what we have in our zoning code right now, so the language that we have in our zoning code right now, it basically allows for a 3-foot fence, so the maximum height of the fence should be 3 feet. This would be for a residential fence within the front yard area. So going back to the example of a building that is located 100 feet away from the edge of the right-of-way, so the code currently limits the height of that fence to 3 feet. So it would be 3-foot fence all the way from the edge of the right-of-way to the back of the building. So what we're trying to do right now is that we're trying to limit the height of the fence to only within the required setback area. So the 3-foot height limitation would only apply to the area within the required setback area. So for a regular size lot, the setback requirement is 20 feet. So the intent here is to limit the height of the fence to 20 feet within the required setback area, within the 20-foot area. So that's what we're proposing. There was quite a bit of discussion about this at the Planning Commission. We do have additional information that we can share with your board, and we do expect testimony from the public regarding this matter today. So we do have additional information that we can share with your board. We're also recommending a new definition for on-sale alcohol. Currently, there is no definition in place for that particular use, so we're just adding a new sentence to describe on-sale alcohol. The next amendment relates to minor use permits. So we're recommending new findings that can be included in our zoning code. So there's new findings that can be utilized by staff when we're evaluating applications for minor use permits. We're also recommending new findings for use permit application. This is to ensure that when we do review conditional use permits, there is an opportunity for us to evaluate the project and to make a determination that the project does comply with development standards that we have in our zoning code. The next amendment relates to zoning code amendment initiation authority. The zoning code currently requires amendments to be initiated through a petition by the community or a resolution by the Board of Supervisors or Planning Commission. However, the zoning code is not clear on when the authority is with the Planning Commission or with the Board of Supervisors. So what we're recommending is that the Planning Commission initiates minor changes. This would be amendments that are proposed to the zoning code relating to clarification or streamlining, and that the Board of Supervisors would initiate any amendments proposed to the zoning code where that item can be controversial or require a substantial amount of funding or resources. Staff has also discovered that several uses and standards were accidentally omitted during the zoning code update. As a result, we're recommending that those items be restored. This is to allow for wholesale store uses in the MP zone, auto repair uses, kept indoors within an enclosed building, commercial zones, and also auto repair uses to be screened from view behind a fence or wall in the industrial area. So this was something that was contained in the prior zoning code. It was not adequately included in the new zoning code update, so we're recommending that information be restored back in the zoning code. The next amendment that we're proposing relates to front yard parking requirement. This is based upon a request that we have received from code enforcement staff. Some background information here. In 2013, the Board of Supervisors had adopted an ordinance limiting paving to 40% of the total front yard area. So the prior code did include information that noted that this limitation would not apply to areas that were paved prior to 2013, and that information was not included in the new zoning code. So therefore, we do not have that provision currently in our zoning code. So basically, the amendment that we're proposing right now is that it reestablishes that paving limitation does not apply if done prior to 2013 or prior to the adoption of that ordinance. The next amendment relates to providing the opportunity for a property owner to live on site in an RV while constructing a new house on that site. So basically, a property owner would have the opportunity to apply for a temporary use permit, and that RV can be used for up to a year while the housing unit is being constructed on site. So the next amendment relates to new standards that we're proposing for car washes, and the reason why we're proposing this is because the zoning code currently does not contain any standards relating to directions for new car washes. And car washes do tend to create neighborhood nuisance and also may address incompatibility issues, especially if the car wash is located adjacent to a residential subdivision. So the amendments that we're proposing right now would provide the opportunity for limited hours of operation. It would also ensure that the car wash tunnels would be closed and secured after hours. And it also provides the opportunity for a good review of the design plans to make sure that vacuum units are appropriately located, especially if the project site is located next to a residential area. There's also a requirement for a 7-foot CMU wall to be placed along the property line if the car wash project site is located adjacent to a residential area. So the last amendment relates to office use within the AR5 zoned area. The prior zoning code did allow for the opportunity for a property owner to pursue a use permit in order to establish an office use in the AR zone, and that opportunity currently does not exist in the zoning code. So what we're trying to do right now as part of this amendment package is to restore the opportunity and to provide the opportunity for a property owner to apply for a conditional use permit in order to establish a commercial use within the AR5 zoned area. So the zoning code amendment package was reviewed by the Planning Commission in March of this year, and the Planning Commission did recommend approval of the amendment package. And at this time, we're asking your board to recognize the exempt status of the project, and also we're recommending that the board approve the amendments that are being proposed to the zoning code. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Natoli?
Yes, thank you, Surinder. Question on the wholesale uses, back to your slide 5, I think. In briefing yesterday with Leanne, I understand this may have been in the previous zoning codes and so forth, but the GC zones and MP zones don't have necessarily the same template as it relates to landscaping requirements. I don't know what the parking requirements, whether that would apply. Obviously, GC is a fairly intense commercial zone, allows for many different commercial enterprises. And I guess part of the concern I raise is that if we're going to provide for, again, wholesale stores in the MP zone, what sort of development standard are you going to use? Part of what I think begins to become a bit of a blight on the landscape is when there's so much product displayed out in the parking, and parking spaces are taken up, and it's not just a small, outlet of maybe damaged materials, but some of our major retailers, home improvement stores, and others. I think there's this creep over time that, they get a lot of product availability, they get, pallets full of stuff, and, it's clogged in the loading storage areas or in the stores, or they're changing out over seasons. I know we ran into this even with Walmart stores a few years ago, that they had, multiple storage containers taking up parking areas in the rear portions of the parking lots and so forth. So what is it that's going to guide that? Again, it would allow, because it allows it basically by outright. And so I don't know, again, is it the same standard? And how do we get a handle on that? It's not that I don't think it shouldn't necessarily be permitted, but MP is not the same as GC.
Correct. I believe there are separate development standards for industrial type of uses, and they're contained in the zoning code right now. So if there is a proposal for a wholesale store use within the MP zone, then there is that opportunity where we can take a look at the standards that are contained in the zoning code and make sure that the standards are being applied to the proposed project.
Because the initial design behind the office industrial was for a large component certainly of job creating and or adjacent warehouse uses, but that's why you have an M1 and a M2 zone for lighter and heavier industrial, and MP was kind of this office park campus that would recognize you might have some intensity of uses. And I guess I'm just concerned that if, it just came to the counter and they said, oh, yeah, well, this is allowed outright, boom, and they developed to the MP standard, because a lot of those office parks are developed to that standard. It's different than GC, where you may have your commercial and or setback requirements and so forth. And, the nighttime activity associated with, a wholesale store that takes deliveries, it might be very different than the office park setting normally would be. That would be their, extended might be from, 6 in the morning till later in the evening, but certainly not an all-night activity. And so do you think we've got sufficient guidance in the code as it relates to if we reinsert this back into the zoning code?
Yeah, I'm looking at staff right now. It looks like they're
not looking
scanning
back at,
through.
they're not looking back at you, though. So
Yeah, so we'll take a look at what we have in the zoning code and report back on that.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, that's fine.
Any other questions? I have one speaker, Monica Kirkland.
Hello, I'm Monica Kirkland. I live at 6508 Addington Court in Orangevale. I tried to think of this last night. I met with some people at the planning yesterday as well as back in April, and I still had questions, and I wanted to go by and see what I could find out. I kind of divided this into 4 sections. One is history, second is the present code, third is new submissions, and lastly, my feelings about it. So the history, I was told, Monica, be brief. So I printed off what I gave you, which was basically a kind of a history that I gave to Ms. Tina Barkley at Susan Frost's office back in April. I knew that the Planning Commission was going to be meeting on the 26th, and I wasn't going to be available on that day. I was going to be in Southern California. So I tried to, put this together. As my disappointment was that I had contacted 2 planning commissioners, 2 planning people, and a code enforcement person. Am I getting feedback or something? Oh. Anyway, and I was told that the front yard fence could only be 3 feet, and the way it was measured was from the front of the lot to the entry to the main dwelling. And so that is one of the reasons I am giving this to you, as well as a few revisions that I made. My computer's not working right now, so I couldn't do much of that. And I'll try to read now, so I will be brief.
Okay, I'd like to point out we have a 3-minute limit here,
Okay.
so I think it's best to get
Did
to
I already
the
use a
question.
minute? Okay.
Yeah, you've used 2 minutes.
I used 2?
Uh-huh.
Okay, if you look at this packet, you will see that my lot isn't as was described, and I provided another copy that Mr. Singh gave. It's not a square lot. My lot is irregular, and I gave you a plot map, and the plot map is 135. I should have maybe outlined it. So you can see that my lot is very irregular, and it juts up against my neighbor's. And my entry is only 15 feet. So I'm trying to read. I don't know. Okay. So the point is, it is an irregular lot, so you can't go back 20 feet. If you went back 20 feet, what is happening is the fence completely closes my house in, which is what has happened. So now it has gone back 20 feet on the neighbor's lot. However, the fence is a common fence. So our lots are adjoining, our front yards are adjoining, and if you go back to the 40, you have to go back 65 feet to get the frontage. You go back 31 on his lot, but you have to go back 50 on mine. And 50 on mine doesn't even reach the 65 frontage. So basically what it's doing is closing my house in. And I'm suggesting that you can maybe consider some exceptions or some solution to this problem, because now as I look out my window, all I see is a fence, and it's not a 6-foot fence, it's really an 8-foot fence, because his lot is 2 feet higher than mine. I know I'm
Thank you for
done.
coming there. No, it's just that it's really hard for us to follow the whole conversation about the fence heights and that sort of
Right.
thing from here.
Well,
So,
I feel that this revision is a penalty to me, and it's a penalty to me not only in the value of my property, but also my safety and my security. I can't see out to the street at all from my house anymore, and
if you could just pause for a minute, Supervisor Frost would like to make a comment. She's your supervisor. She represents
Yes.
you on the board.
And so what would you like?
If you would just
So,
pause for a minute so you
Oh,
can have
yes.
some feedback.
Okay.
I wonder if the staff can also come up. I have a question to staff on this, but Mrs. Kirkland, I know my staff have been working with you on this. I'm not sure which lot on this map
It's
is
135,
yours.
I believe.
135?
Yes, and I'm sorry, I should have,
And, okay, so,
yes,
I see.
135.
so you have an unusual
I have a very
parcel.
unusual lot,
Oh, yeah.
and
And-
I'm told it's called a flag lot.
Okay, so the question I have with staff is, are there exceptions to the rule, the zoning rule? And I know we're working with Mrs. Kirkland to try to work this out, so I'm assuming there might be some exceptions to the rule, and we might be able to negotiate with the neighbor on how this might work better. And thank you for coming in, Mrs. Kirkland. We're going to continue working with you, but I think at this time you can go ahead and sit down, and I'm going to ask the staff to respond.
Okay, but I would like to answer any questions that you might have that I can answer also.
Okay, at this point, I don't have any. I want to see if we can get, I don't think we can work this out today, but we definitely will want to figure out how we move forward with it. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jessica Brandt with the Office of Planning and Environmental Review. I've been working with Ms. Kirkland on this issue. She does have an odd-shaped lot. It's on a curved street, cul-de-sac, and the houses, as they were placed back in 1979, vary from where they are in relation to the front of the properties. We did include, after talking with Ms. Kirkland, an additional clarification in the cleanup amendments related to the fencing for lots that are on a cul-de-sac or a curved street, clarifying that the fence, the required front yard for the fencing would be measured with the setback that's required for a house on a curved lot. And
Where is that in the standards?
can I have the overhead, please? Is there a way to zoom in?
Yeah, you gotta bear with me.
So we can't
So-
read that. No,
Can you-
we can't
can you
read
read
that.
that? You can't read
If
it?
you'd give us the number, we could look it up.
Sure.
Is it 525B, and then
Yes, 525D2.
B2? Underlined in red, right?
Is that right? The fencing is 525B2, C. And the section that I have up on the overhead, which I apologize, it's so small, is section 521A2. And that's our general how to determine front yard setback area for,
15.
yeah, page.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so for curved streets, we actually require usually a larger setback. You would need to show that you meet the width of that zoning before you're allowed to build your house. So often with these lots on cul-de-sacs, they have a smaller front width. You have to measure back until you hit the minimum width for the lot, and that's considered your setback. And so we did include a clarifying portion, which is the C here, for lots that are on cul-de-sacs to make it clear that it's not a 20-foot setback, it's whatever the setback for a cul-de-sac lot is. And that can vary depending on where the house, excuse
Okay,
me.
but this doesn't really refer to her lot. She's got a flag lot.
She's actually, it's not a flag lot.
Okay. Looks like it in the map.
And 139 is even narrower than 135 at the front.
So we consider this, it is definitely an irregular lot, but it's not considered a flag lot. This is considered a cul-de-sac lot. And so we did include some setback lines here. The first curved arc would be the 20-foot setback if this was just a regular square lot.
That's no fence at all?
That's just ignoring fences, just talking setbacks generally.
I know, but setback would not allow a fence or allow a 3-foot fence under your proposal?
This would allow a 3-foot fence for if the cleanup is adopted, the 3-foot fence would be allowed in this 20-foot area.
Okay.
And then beyond that area, you would be allowed a 7-foot fence.
So she's boxed in?
So that's what the neighbor did to the north, is they put a fence along the shared property line that went right up to the 20-foot mark. What we ended up doing with the cleanup, it would be considered compliant with this cleanup. What we did was clarify that with lots like these, they will have to meet that additional setback requirement that's part of having a cul-de-sac lot. And so the neighbor, with this clarification, would have to go back another about 16 feet in order to hit the width requirement for the lot. And so that still leaves 7-foot fence along a good portion of the shared property line. And unfortunately, the way these houses are situated, she's so far back. If we were to go to where her house would be for a setback, you would end up beyond the back corner of this house before you would consider it a side yard fence. So staff is recommending that we move forward with our clarifications as proposed.
So are you going to be able to do anything to help her with the situation?
Are we working with the neighbor, and are they amenable to
Yes,
working with her?
they already did remove a portion of the fence to bring it back to the 20-foot, and then we did let them know that with the clarification regarding this curved street frontage, that they will have to go another few feet back, and so they're aware that that's something that they need to do.
Okay. It's difficult because when you have a lot like that, you're isolated anyway. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, you have options. You could go with the larger on the shared property line. If you wanted to go with the setback that's further back, you could, but then you end up with the reverse situation where now this person can't have a side yard fence until beyond their house. So it does end up, unfortunately, you have a winner and a loser when you come to these side yard fences.
What if you went right just to the angle point? That takes it beyond the person's house?
The angle point, it would actually be beyond that angle point. It would be close.
Using your theory, but I said if you just went to the angle point, that would open it up and still get to there. It wouldn't cut into the side yard for the other house.
If they went to this angle point, that still blocks her view.
It's still what?
Blocks her view.
Blocks the view.
Yeah, you'd almost have to go clear back to their house.
Yeah, this is a very unfortunate situation. This is actually a very unique situation as well.
You get the reverse just across the street, just right around the cul-de-sac, though. If you look at lot 139, I don't know if there's a fencing issue, but you
They're going to have the same
very
thing.
similar situation. Looking at the map that she submitted, you could have it.
Oh, I don't have that one.
No, I know. I'm just saying you could have two in the same cul-de-sac. You got one that has even narrower frontage than the one she showed. What about we're looking at smaller lots in a lot of these subdivisions where you're trying to get, RD8 and RD10 on single lots, and you got all. It seems to me that this was done 40 years ago almost, in '79 it sounds like, and it hasn't been a problem until most recently. But it seems to me that this, where people, and we're now allowing 7-foot fences, and if you have a grade differential, that fence is to her point, it was a 6-foot fence, and we now allow 7 by right, which we didn't allow before, it was only 6 foot. I guess it seems to me that, I don't know how we're going to, this is in Ms. Frost's district and how we're going to necessarily address this, but you're asking for a code determination here that, will have, impacts throughout the county. And I guess as I think about some of the smaller subdivisions as well, I mean, they're coming through, we need to be cognizant of this, I think in our review, Jessica, because otherwise somebody, may not be the 5 of us, was going to inherit a lot of these, because those lots are different configurations. Everyone wants to be on a cul-de-sac, but
could I suggest if there's further discussion here on this one, maybe we pull the fence piece out and you get further opportunity to develop an answer to your questions, and we can go ahead with the rest of the amendments. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
Okay. Questions other than fencing?
Just maybe report back on the stores, if we could, before we...
Okay, or bring it back in the next. I'd suggest, Ms. Brandt or the planning director, that you work with the homeowner, Ms. Kirkland in this case, and then talk to the 2 supervisors that know something about the fences, and bring it back the next time you bring us a zoning code amendment.
I think this is kind of an isolated, this is probably
It
a
is,
very
but there needs to be a
rare
way to
situation.
deal with isolated
Yeah.
instances.
Yeah. I mean, it may be isolated. I do want to say I was at a friend's house on Saturday night out in Fair Oaks, and I noticed that they have a fence that's 6 foot high that goes all the way to the back of the walk that's been an existing fence. So I think when we look around, we're going to find a whole variety of circumstances, because the county is so large and has so many different types of things. But we'd be happy to look at it in more detail and see if we can't come up,
Homeowners some options.
yeah, with something else
Okay.
for these unique circumstances. So we would be happy to do that. With regard, Supervisor Natoli, to your question about outdoor display and storage, we do have a provision in the zoning code. However, it has an exception for all industrial uses. So it's section 3.9.3.j. So in the commercial zones, including GC, it is more restrictive with regard to outdoor display, but it is not restrictive to industrial zones, including MP, which would be an industrial zone. So our options would be, you could direct us in the next package, because we are doing these packages about 3 times a year.
Right.
You could direct us to come back to 3.9.3J and get a little more restrictive with regard to the MP industrial office park zone, if you're comfortable going a few months, assuming that would probably
give
be
me
an option.
the number again.
Sure, it's 3.9.3.J in the current zoning code. It's not in your package, because we did not amend it, so it is not in your board report.
Oh.
Because we did
The
not.
next time around.
Yeah, we would have to look at amending that during the next package to address Supervisor Natoli's concerns, because you don't have that in your current package.
Okay. So we would need a motion to go forward with this, except for item 4, the fencing definitions, to come back next time with further attention to it, and then some suggested changes to 3.9.3.J.
Yes.
Okay, that's a motion.
Second.
Vote.
Unanimous vote.
Thank you.
Item 54 is the general plan amendment to add the environmental justice element. Request for a general plan amendment to add a new element, environmental justice, to the general plan. The environmental view is exempt.
Thank you. I do have a PowerPoint. Chair Peters, members of the board, my name is John Lundgren with the Office of Planning and Environmental Review. And this is the presentation for our Phase 1 environmental justice element. Passed in 2016, the Senate Bill 1000 requires cities and counties which have disadvantaged communities incorporate environmental justice policies into their general plan. We do have those communities, and that is why we're here today. It's important to note that in complying with SB 1000, the county is not merely taking land use best practices and saying that these should apply to an environmental justice community, but instead we are examining each environmental justice community and determining if there are any geographic or procedural inequities that are leading to unique or compounded health effects in those communities. SB 1000 sets forth several topical requirements that we need to examine at the community level. And that's the first 5 bullet points here on the slide. The 6th one, crime prevention, specifically crime prevention through environmental design, we added, and that is provided for in the law to add additional topics that are important to our community. SB 1000 also requires us to address some issues on a county-wide level, and those would be the promotion of civil engagement, aka civic engagement, as well as the prioritization of programs and improvements that address the needs in our environmental justice communities. We've established 2 phases in the development of the environmental justice element. Phase 1, which we're hopeful will conclude today, includes background on those topical areas and baseline research, as well as traditional public engagement, mainly consisting of workshops with our CPACs in the affected areas. We've also scoped what existing policies exist in the general plan that may have an environmental justice component, as well as we've completed limited policy development. Phase 2, which we will have lasting approximately 12 months, would begin immediately following approval of Phase 1 if the board is so inclined, and that would include further policy development, but most importantly, much more extensive public input and research. We really do understand the need to get innovative and embed ourselves in the community and have a dialogue with people. Our goal for that would be approval mid-2019. It would be fair to say that Phase 1, EJ element, complies with the letter of the law, complies with the SB 1000 letter of the law. And Phase 2, when completed, will comply with the spirit of the law. As a starting point in identifying our environmental justice communities, SB 1000 requires us to use a web-based program developed by the California EPA called CalEnviroScreen. And we've done that, and that is the areas you see on the map in green. To that, we added in additional data as provided for in the law that was low-income, high-minority areas that SACOG identified as part of their 2016 Metropolitan Transportation Plan Sustainable Community Strategy. That is the yellow mustard-colored area on the map. We rounded that out with what we know as our community boundaries. These aren't the entire CPAC areas, but we rounded these areas out with existing community boundaries, major roadways, to make what we have now as a community scale and more cohesive identification of our environmental justice communities. And you'll notice I'm using the term environmental justice. SB 1000 asks us to identify disadvantaged communities. We've done that, but we're not going to keep labeling our communities that way. We now have environmental justice communities. In Phase 1, as I mentioned, we visited the 5 CPACs that share boundaries or within these environmental justice communities. More importantly, I want to talk about the advisory committee that we established. This is a 7-member committee which is comprised of topic specialists in these environmental justice areas. And I do know that 4 of them are directly behind me in the audience there. And I do want to thank them for their service. They've added a level of input and transparency for us, as well as because some of the members are community-based and trusted in the community. They've really helped us embed with the community and have a better dialogue. In total, we have representatives from the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District, the Community Resource Project, the Food Policy Council, Walk Sacramento, VG Consulting, the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department, and the Sacramento County Department of Health Services on our advisory committee. This slide shows the basic organization of the environmental justice element. More importantly, however, it shows the goals that we've developed in guiding our policy development. As you're aware, the Sacramento County General Plan follows a hierarchy of goals supported by objectives that lead to policies, and ultimately policies that are implemented through implementation measures. So the 2 goals you see there, they focus on the equitable protection of hazards, protection from hazards, as well as meaningful civic participation for all people. Based on those goals and with reference to the enabling legislation of SB 1000, we've developed the 2 policies as well as supporting objective language and implementation measures you see on the screen. You'll notice both the implementation measures talk about a 12-month process to complete Phase 2. That is our commitment to the advocates that we intend to finish this process. As I mentioned, phase 1 meets the letter of the law. Phase 2 will meet the spirit of the law. And that's our hardline commitment to finishing the process with the appropriate amount of increased public engagement to, again, meet the spirit of that law. So the two policies, they're focused on improving our public engagement with the community, especially with regard to demographic analysis. We need to know the people that we're working with and how to communicate with them on their terms, in their space. The second policy is one that is required more or less by the law, which is to prioritize program improvements within the EJ areas. Our next steps would be to begin phase 2, and that would build upon the work that we have completed for phase 1. The biggest component of that is going to be this deeper dive into community-based outreach. Innovative, new, in addition to the CPACs, in addition to the workshops, tabling at community events, web-based outreach, individual conversations with trusted neighborhood spokespeople, etc. And also importantly, we intend to develop a framework to assist in this prioritization that we've mentioned. And it's not our goal to develop any kind of a framework that ties hands, but instead to develop a framework that will act as a lens through which we can evaluate our land use decisions and the decisions we make as a community. And we intend to have that completed, as I stated, in May of 2019. We did receive a unanimous approval from our Planning Commission, and we did have some public speakers there. They were all generally supportive of the EJ element. Most of them represented advocacy groups, but they did want to see an increased scope within the EJ element, specifically to add in affordable housing, climate change, and transit. And we did explain that staff understood that those were very important components and directly related to environmental justice, and that we fully intended to talk to the co-benefits of addressing climate change and environmental justice and transit, how those all go together to reduce vehicle miles traveled. We definitely understand that the effects of climate change will hit communities of color harder, but we did make the point that it is important for us, for each of those processes, to stay in their own lane. As you know, we are already developing our climate action plan. We have a phase 1 approved, a phase 2A for government operations approved, and we're currently working on phase 2B for community-wide. Also, as you know, we're mandated by the state to have a housing element, and we have an affordable housing ordinance, and that housing element is updated on an 8-year cycle. So we've completely recognized the importance of those issues, but because of existing state rules and regulations, mandates, and timelines, we do desire to keep those separate. Our recommended action is that we recognize the exempt status of this project under CEQA, and that we adopt the resolution amending the general plan to add our phase 1 environmental justice element. And that concludes my presentation.
Mr. Cerna.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and thanks to all of our planning staff for, I think, treating what is a very important follow-up task since the legislation has been passed to finally memorialize what I think is a really important part of land use planning, which is applying a very focused eye to environmental justice. I know serving in other capacities, whether it be at Regional Transit or on the California Air Resources Board, environmental justice is something that has been part of the missions for those respective agencies for a great number of years. So to have it finally kind of find its place here in our Constitution for Growth, Development, and Environmental Preservation, our general plan, I think is very timely. I did have a question, and I posed this question to Leanne during our briefing, and I'm hoping that in the phase 2 work that's forthcoming that we'll be able to exploit in a good way if the opportunity presents itself, working with other cities, including the city of Sacramento, as it relates to kind of the geography of what we're talking about. You had on one of your slides the various polygons that outline the areas that are quote-unquote disadvantage per Cal Enviro screen, and also this separate yet complementary assessment of high minority, low income areas. But I have to imagine that those areas don't exist in a vacuum. In fact, they may be coterminous with, for instance, what the city of Sacramento might also consider in terms of their efforts to incorporate an environmental justice element into their respective general plan. So I just encourage us to kind of keep that open mind as we move forward and look at the prospect of where we might be able to actually work with some of our sister jurisdictions here in terms of their efforts to do what we're being asked to do here.
Thank you. We will continue to do that. I want to let you know we have met with the city and had a very productive meeting. A real benefit of our committee is one of our members, Ms. Cole, through her own business, has a contract with the California Endowment to help roll out environmental justice in the Sacramento region. So we've been able to piggyback on some of her events happening in the community where we're invited guests, and we've done that side by side with city staff, ignoring county boundary lines. And then also, the great thing about having County Health Services on our advisory committee, as you're aware, they often operate in our incorporated cities. And so when they're doing events in the incorporated cities, we're very sure to make sure that they're having a presence with our materials and our information. But loud and clear, hear what you're saying, and we'll continue to monitor that and make sure we're coordinating.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy?
So we got a letter from ACT that I'm sure you've seen and you've heard the comments, and there's been probably other comments during the outreach process to include these specific 3 areas that you talked about in phase 2. But at this point, this is a leading question. It's not our intention to add those to phase 2. Is that correct?
That is correct.
But whether or not we were to add those to phase 2, we're still addressing all of those issues.
Yes.
Yes. That is correct. We are.
Okay.
Separate track, but parallel.
Okay. Great.
Maybe in the report, should it say refer to RT plan or?
Well, actually, when I met with the, if I could dovetail off to what Supervisor Kennedy has brought up, when I met with the ACT folks just yesterday, I did point out that we have other elements, chapters, if you will, in our general plan that address some of what they've raised, including the public transit piece and our transportation element, the affordable housing, low-income housing concerns that is expressed pretty specifically in our housing element. I'd let them know about the RENA exercise that we, by law, have to go through on a fairly frequent basis to take inventory of land that is zoned for appropriate densities as a surrogate for different income categories. But I also did suggest that there's, I think, probably of the 3 main concerns that they expressed in their letter, the one about climate change probably has the most legs in terms of the ability to maybe refine itself as we move along through phase 2 and as we're continuing to find ways to incorporate reference to our intent to address climate change in our planning documents.
Thank you. Mr. Natoli?
Well, hang on.
Oh, I'm sorry. We both interrupted you.
No. So I'm trying to get my train of thought back here. So I guess my point is that, particularly the climate piece, we have a separate process going specifically for that, regardless of whether or not we were doing this exercise.
Yes, we do. It's a requirement of the general plan. It came out of mitigation from the EIR when the general plan was updated.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Mr. Natoli?
Yes, just very briefly. So, and I also want to refer to the letter from Area Congregations Together. So, I know you referenced it a bit in your presentation, but the points about phase 2 and what that means, is it just another planning effort, or actually will it have specific measures for implementation? And if so, will there be some checkbacks? What's anticipated for the phase 2 approach beyond what you've already said? Because I think that was a real point. I took, obviously, certainly the subject matter areas that have been referenced by you and my colleagues in some of their questions, but I guess kind of what to expect with the what next piece of this, John.
So what we know so far is, and this is through work with our advisory committee and our own research, is there's some low-hanging fruit existing in the general plan in other sections, an air quality element, for example, where with just a very minor tweaking of a couple words, we can really bring it home and help EJ communities. And so we're working with our advisory committee on refining that language, but specific issues in our baseline data research, we've begun looking at drive-through locations. We've begun looking at air quality implementation and truck routes, something we're going to explore, and we don't know yet, but what we'll be exploring is there any benefit, for example, of policies with regard to the location of air quality monitoring equipment in Sacramento County? Are there any voids for this monitoring equipment in EJ areas? That could be one example. We're looking at is there a correlation between the proximity of drive-throughs and a community-wide body mass index? At this point, it looks like the correlation's not there, but it might be there for drive-throughs and their proximity to schools. And so when we explore that, if the data supports it, we'll see if policy development comes out of that. We've looked at the amount of public facilities in each of the communities, for example, miles of Class 1, Class 2 bike trails, and starting to draw comparisons as to whether those communities are short on those amounts of bike trails, and if there is space and opportunities then to see that those trails get in. That'd be a reference back to the bicycle master plan and see if those are planned in there. And so perhaps a result of phase 2 would just be call attention to a project in a bicycle master plan that hasn't advanced for many years, and to add to the fact, hey, by the way, this is also in an EJ community. Maybe we could prioritize it.
So, can I just take from your comments, and not to be funny about it, but so when you talk about fast food restaurants around schools, then you might suggest there'd be a fast food free zone, or what? I mean, how do you get to something like that when you have commercial enterprises that nobody forces people to eat there, but if that's all that's available, obviously people would maybe choose to go there because they don't have anything else that's closer, or transit may not be available to them, whatever. So what sort of strategies would you envision around that, or are you just...
Well, he hasn't said it would come back that way yet.
No,
I think they have more research to do before they decide on that.
I wasn't insinuating that he had. I just got to... I mean, you made that general reference. I'm just, kind of the mindset of how you go into this is...
You are hitting on the core element of the discussions we've had as staff with each other and with our advisory committee. And these are, as I've told people in our public workshops, please count on the fact that your public servants are having some knockdown, drag-out discussions, professional discussions, but we're really getting into the weeds to make sure we're doing right by our community, because there's a number of ways to slice that apple. We've heard everything from prohibitions on drive-throughs to incentives for other types of uses instead of drive-throughs. Some of our CPACs have said, shouldn't you have the free market determining where drive-throughs are located? That's all on the table. That's part of this discussion. And I think it's very important as we start to get into those weeds, and that's why my second slide really did talk about we're not applying planning best practices to EJ communities, but instead looking for those unique and compounding factors that are present in our EJ communities. Something that part of the land use dialogue that we've had over time and over the generations that have tipped the table of inequity and put a greater burden on the EJ communities.
Okay, just a couple quick questions. So is Dr. Kisiri, our public health officer, is she involved in this? And secondly, is the Public Health Advisory Board engaged in a part of the conversations? And maybe even the Human Services Coordinating Council to some degree. It seems to me, again, we've had those discussions in the distant past, certainly with the Human Service Coordinating Council regarding service and service delivery, but it would seem to me Public Health Advisory Board, maybe other bodies as well, but those come to mind, and certainly the Public Health Officer for the county, if she's not, ought to be involved, she or her department, so.
We haven't met with them yet. I took notes on that. Those are 3 very good suggestions. Similar suggestion came out of our Carmichael Old Foothill Farm CPAC, as well as to work actively with the voter reg people, because they put a tremendous amount of mileage on this topic recently, as you know.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Any further questions for staff? Okay, thank you. You can be seated. We have several public comments. Ralph Proper, Theodore Goodwin are the first 2. Mr. Proper?
Yes, I'm Ralph Proper. I'm the current president of the Environmental Council of Sacramento, or ECOS. We've recently formed an Environmental Justice Committee to deal with issues such as this, and some comments from this committee include the desire that county staff meet not just with CPAC, but with community organizations in the affected communities for the full input and outreach that's required. Just to mention by way of background, I'm a past president of Breathe California of Sacramento and researcher in air pollution. We've done research in the areas, the disadvantaged communities near 99 freeway in South Sacramento, and we find near the freeway a lot of people are exposed to extremely high levels of dangerous pollutants there. This could be addressed by having vegetation barriers there. That's something to consider. There are a lot of other issues for disadvantaged communities to deal with. Affordable housing near transit. We need better support for transit and more housing. The housing that's been going on in a lot of these areas is detached single family, and for richer people, pushing disadvantaged people out to areas where they don't have access to public transit. So these are all factors that need to be considered. So we really hope that in this phase 2 that we'll see a lot more attention to these issues. As was pointed out, climate change is something that especially affects disadvantaged communities. Public transit, as I mentioned, it often doesn't serve disadvantaged communities as well as it does other areas. We hope that the route optimization study that RT is planning will help address that. So these are just some of the thoughts that we'll be watching as we go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Goodwin?
Thank you.
Oscar Balaguer. Sorry if I mispronounced that.
My name is Theodore Goodwin. I'm a member of the Environmental Justice Committee of SAC Act. I'm glad that you have reviewed the letter dated April 16 from our executive director outlining the 3 areas that we believe should have been included in the phase 1 report. The problem we see about them not being included is that we've been told by Mr. Lundgren that phase 2 will fine-tune the issues identified in phase 1, and we don't want these crucial issues of climate change, housing, and public transit to be shortchanged in the phase 2 evaluation period. We don't see a reason why they should not be included. There's no greater cost. It's the same amount of staff consumption of time and interviewing people. And the biggest unknown, of course, is climate change. We've already had extreme periods of long heat in the summers. We've had unusual rain patterns. These are issues that are very likely to affect everyone in the county in the long term. And flooding, lack of access to air conditioning, power outages, these are the kinds of problems that will impact low-income people, especially if they don't have homes, if they're in short-term housing, if they're unemployed or they're chronically unemployed. These are the people who cannot drive to another neighborhood to relocate their lives. So we think these are issues that need to be addressed. SAC Act represents approximately 56 community organizations, including congregations and schools. We have approximately 60,000 people in Sacramento County and neighboring counties who are represented by SAC Act. So we think this is a sizable community, and many of the people who communicate with us are low income.
Could you wind up your comments, Mr. Goodwin?
Yes, I'm ready to wind up, but I just want to convey to you that we think this is a serious issue, and we're asking that you modify the report and include the 3 topics that we've identified in the letter. Thank you
very much. Mr. Balaguer, and then Jackie Cole. Apologies if I mispronounce your last name.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Thank you, Supervisor Peters, for pronouncing my name properly, my last name properly on the very first try. I have three concerns about the proposed DJ element. One is to do with the planning process. The second, as with other commenters, has to do with scoping. And the third has to do with the Phase 1 policies. Regarding the planning process, as staff has indicated, SB 1000 requires that the county adopt the EJ element no later than the simultaneous adoption of two other elements, or rather update of two other general plan elements prior to January 1st, 18. And staff believes this is a problem, and to get around that problem, they've proposed the Phase 2 two-phase process, which has been described. Phase 1 is before you now, and staff has described the proposed Phase 2. The problem, as I see it, is that Phase 1 will be the total and complete response to the mandate which SB 1000 imposes on the county. Phase 2 will be an elective process, a discretionary process with no requirements whatsoever regarding its content, its scope, its products, its scheduling, or anything else. Staff has proposed a process to us today for Phase 2, and I'm sure that will be forthcoming. But again, there's no legal underpinning to that Phase 2 process, nor do the Phase 1 policies provide any guidance for Phase 2. So notwithstanding staff's firm aspirations for Phase 2, they're not asking you to commit to anything regarding its completion or content. So we have a rather compromised planning process where policies are promulgated first. You're asked to adopt them today, and then over the next 12 months, the problems which those policies purport to address will be identified. It's a problematic process, in my opinion, that may not totally support the best product nor public confidence in the process. Regarding scoping,
Could you wind up your comments, please, Mr. Balaguer?
Yes. Regarding scoping, I repeat the concerns that previously were expressed. Yes, the county does have other planning processes to address these issues, but as the document indicates, that's the case for all of the topics that are covered in the EJ element. As page 1 of the document indicates, however, they need to be covered in the EJ element because that's the only document in which they EJ questions,
Could you wind up your comments,
focused.
please?
Yes. Finally, regarding the elements themselves, there seems very little to hang one's hat on in regard to their substantive nature, nor do they provide any guidance for Phase 2. On that account, I would request that the supervisors provide guidance to the staff, whose effort, by the way, I applaud. The document itself is a highly credible document. It's just that the policies are very disappointing. Guidance to the effect...
Thank you, Mr. Balaguer. Thank you very much. Our next
You're
speaker is
welcome.
Jackie Cole.
Hello. Thank you, members of the Board of Supervisors, and thank you, Chair Peters. Yeah, you can just leave it there. My name is Jackie Cole, and I represent the members of the Environmental Justice Advisory Committee for the county. We are made up of government agencies, pseudo-agencies, nonprofits, and community members. We are thankful to be on this committee and to be working so closely with county staff on this process. And we, as a committee, are encouraged by the direction that the staff has been taking with this effort. We see the unifying concept that ties all of us and these policies together as being health and the promotion of health equity, especially in environmental justice communities. And the more that we can be open to creative, inclusive, and meaningful policies and strategies, the more successful we will be as a community in improving health and the economy. We look forward to continuing to ensure that this effort is meaningful and inclusive of disadvantaged communities. And those are the end of the remarks for the advisory committee, but I just wanted to take a moment to say that although we may not entirely agree with the comments that have been represented by Sacramento Act, we do find those to be very valuable. And in the conversations that we're having, with the different communities and partners who've been engaging with us on this, those are some of the concerns that we have expressed and we would like to see identified and addressed. I'd also like to say that in respect of how this has the potential to be applied to the climate action plan, that the purpose of this is to help us prioritize EJ communities in that process. So it's important that we yes, that those different efforts need to be handled in their own lane, but also that the primary objective of this policy is to prioritize those identified communities. I know I'm over time, but I just want to say that somebody also brought up best practices, and I don't think that that should be ignored. What we're trying to do right now is to flesh out and make the policies that are existing a little bit more comprehensive. Best practices and working with other communities and counties and cities is an excellent way for us to approach that as well. And I appreciate Board Member Cerna's comments about working with other agencies, because I think that that's going to be one of the most comprehensive ways that we approach this.
Okay, thank you so much. Brenda Ruiz. If you give it to our clerk, she's standing at the microphone there.
Good afternoon, Supervisors and Chair. My name is Brenda Ruiz. I'm the president of the Sacramento Food Policy Council. My sincere apologies that this letter didn't get entered in time for you guys to see it before now. It's a summary of the comments and collective input by our General Plan Subcommittee. In 2016, the Sacramento Food Policy Council undertook a strategic planning process, and engaging the Food Policy Council on general plans campaigns, both at the county and city level, was the #1 respondent. Received the #1 responses amongst our members and the agencies that we ally with. So we're very invested in seeing, working with the advisory committee, with you all and with staff on seeing that EJ elements are almost a cross-cutting element. One observation from the comments here and then just sitting back and watching the process is that the EJ element should be a cross-cutting element across all policies. And the way it's set up now is that every single time there's an element updated, EJ communities and EJ advocates have to run and run to that place and run to that fire. And I think we have a real opportunity here to set a standard across the state where the EJ element is prioritized to where it's the #1 thing that's ticked off the list whenever you're approving any plan or anything that comes before you. So we look forward to that. And again, we have 2 of our members sit in the advisory council and 2 of our board members do. So we are encouraged. We see where Sacramento County can be a little bit more aggressive in making EJ a bigger priority. And also recognizing that the Cal Enviro screen and some of the proximity access to food is not the answer to food access, and especially food justice. So just having a geopin and a locator of fresh food is this many miles from a resident community does not qualify as having met the bar for food access. And we know jobs and affordable housing have much more to do to whether families can access fresh food. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Mr. Cerna?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is that the end of our speaker list?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm prepared to move the item today. Before we entertain that vote, I just have a suggestion for staff as we move into the Phase 2 activity. I think it would be wise to perhaps meet at least once with some of the folks that I have an opportunity to work with at the ARB, the Air Resources Board. We have I mentioned it earlier in my comments, just a very refined focus on environmental justice in a lot of different respects. But we do have some very specialized staff, including executive staff, that do nothing but make sure that we're looking through that lens constantly. So I think it's an easy enough exercise to go through, at least to have that meeting and maybe understand some of the experience that they might be willing to share as we draw closer to completing this work here, including dealing with some very specific legislation on environmental justice and working with disadvantaged communities.
That would be very helpful. We'd appreciate that. It could be useful for our climate action plan work as well.
And then my last comment is, one of the things that I think this entire board is very, very proud of is dealing with some health and public safety disparities in some of our subpopulations here in Sacramento County. I think we ought not to lose sight of that work and how it may, again, complement the refinement of this work here in terms of public safety, not just health, but certainly health and public safety. And I know that there's been a focus on SEPTED, and there will continue to be as it relates to this element, but that's something to keep in mind as well. So with that, I'd like to move the item.
Okay.
Second.
We have some more discussion. Mr. Natoli?
Yeah, just a question, not so much on the motion, but while Leanne's there, some clarification. So last speaker, Ms. Ruiz, raised the question about having either a level playing field or that this would cut across the various elements of the general plan. Could you just address that? Again, I didn't specifically, I understand the different areas of elements and so forth, but to her point about having to run every time there's some consideration, some element, how does this get interjected, assuming that we have some policy directives and implementation comes out of it? Obviously it has to comport with other elements of the general plan, but where does it come in the spectrum of various elements and equivalency and or integration, I guess, is probably the question I want to ask.
So as the board well knows, the general plan is a series of chapters. And so there are a whole variety of elements that we have. And we don't put one element or one chapter really above or below any of the other elements. They're all sort of on an equal footing as chapters in this larger general plan book. So clearly the state has wanted us to look and create, we could have actually spread environmental justice throughout the general plan or done a separate element. As staff, we felt it was better to call out a separate element. But you are right, the topics between land use and ag or environmental justice and housing do kind of weave together. So we have, as this first phase, created this separate environmental justice element because we thought that highlighted the issues better rather than sort of sprinkling them and mingling them throughout the overall general plan. The housing element is its own chapter. It has a very robust set of policies. And we will be updating it starting in another year or so. We'll start kicking off that preparation for that 8-year cycle. So it could be as a result of discussions about environmental justice that may inform components that could lead to our work on the housing element. So there certainly may be a relationship there, and it may be at the end of the phase 2 process we come back and have a dialogue with the board about that, or talk about that as we're starting to scope the next housing
Maybe show us how they
element.
knit together as we go forward here.
Yeah.
Again, so we can have that conversation.
Last time we'll hear this.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So that we can get some sense of that and kind of keep that as a marker so that helps us, but also the communities we're working with about this. So that's okay. Thanks.
I think you have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Unanimous vote. Item 55 is the appeal of the zoning administrator's approval of a conditional use permit for a property located at 11859 North Valenson Road on the east side of Colony Road in the southeast area community. The environmental determination is a negative declaration, and this is regarding the Squirrel Monkey Haven.
Is testimony required under oath?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't think people have entered the room yet, though.
Pardon me?
I don't think people have all entered the room yet. That's what I was. They may be-
Okay, so.
I can take the oath at the end of the...
Yeah, we'll ask the clerk to go outside and invite those people who
Coming in.
want to
I see they're
testify
coming in
on the
now.
squirrel monkey issue to come in and be seated.
They're coming.
Sworn.
All right, would you like me to start the presentation and do the oath after?
No, there's too much noise, I
Okay.
think.
All right.
Oh. You can stand up if that's better. They're still coming in. So we're going to proceed on item 55, the squirrel monkey issue. If anyone plans to testify today, and I have a large stack of speaker requests, I think you need to have sworn testimony, so if you would stand and raise your right hand, and the clerk will take you further down that road.
Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give this board is the truth, so help you God? If you do not swear, do you so affirm? And when you get to the podium, please state your name for the record and the statement, "I have been sworn."
So when you come up to the podium, say, "I have been," your name, and then "I have been sworn." Okay? But first, we're going to have staff testimony.
All right, good afternoon, members of the board. I'm Leanne Moffett, your County Planning Director, and I do have a PowerPoint. I did want to start off by introducing a couple of individuals in the audience in case there are detailed questions that are here to help out today. Wendy Hartman has been Planning's project manager, and it may be that she has more detailed information if we delve into detailed questions. We also have Tim Hawkins, the environmental coordinator here, if there are questions about CEQA or the CEQA document, and Dave Dickinson was kind enough to come as well, who's the Director of Animal Care and Regulation, in case there are any questions of him. Let's see. So starting off with an overview, the project location is at 11859 North Valenson Road on the east side of Colony Road in the southeast area community. The site is 5 acres. It is zoned A5. Which is similar to our AR5 agricultural residential zone. North Valenson in this segment is a private drive, private road. It is a public road west of Colony Road, and it connects with Arno and Highway 99 well off to the west. But when it hits Colony, it becomes a private road. The request before you today is an appeal of the approval by the zoning administrator of a conditional use permit that would allow for the construction of an indoor-outdoor kennel to house up to 55 squirrel monkeys on property zoned A5. The zoning administrator appeal was made of the zoning administrator's decision on March 28th, 2018 by Dawn and Zena Clonch, who are represented by the law office of Donald Mooney. The original decision by the zoning administrator occurred at a hearing on March 21st, 2018. There are 2 stated reasons for the appeal. One is that a negative declaration is not an appropriate CEQA document, and instead a full environmental impact report should be prepared. And that the project does not comprise a kennel under the Sacramento zoning code. And because the item has been appealed on the basis of lack of preparation of an EIR, typically an appeal of a zoning administrator decision would go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, which is the Planning Commission. But in this case, in the zoning code as well as in state law, it provides for that appeal to come to the Board of Supervisors. This is a de novo hearing, which means the entirety of the project is before you today. You can act on its entirety. You can act on the conditions or change conditions. This is an aerial of the site on the left. The subject property is shown in red outline with red hash marks. They're at the east end of Valenson Road. We show Colony Road is over on the left of the aerial, and there's a parallel road running east-west called Iguana a bit to the north, in case you hear any of those road names called out. Surrounding to the property to the north, south, and west is similar A5 zoned property, and to the east is A20, which is similar to the Ag 20, 20-acre minimums agriculture, some of which is in vineyard and orchard. This is the site plan here, showing the details of the subject 5-acre property. There is an existing house and barn and a detached garage outbuilding already on the property over on the left-hand side. The driveway comes off the end of Valenson there at the bottom left of this map, and the driveways sort of curve into the house. There is a paved portion of the driveway and then a larger gravel area. The proposed kennel, which is being proposed to be built, is in the middle of the site here. The proposed kennel facilities include a 2,700-acre steel building that would have 18 interior cages.
2,700 square foot, not 2,700 acres.
Thank you. 2,700 square foot steel building. Thank you very much. 18 interior cages, 18 attached outdoor habitats that range in size from 240 to 288 square feet. The outdoor habitats are constructed of zoo-quality caging. They are enclosed on the top, and they're accessed by caregivers through a double security gate system, as would occur in a zoo-type setting. The bottom of the cages will be decomposed granite with mulch bedding. The mulch bedding is removed twice a week, and one of the questions has been what should the bottom of the cages be made from, and there has been some discussion of the potential to use cement. The standards for primates do call for a natural substrate like DG or dirt rather than cement. The habitats will have small trees, shrubs, or other perches for the squirrel monkeys to climb on, and the cages will also extend a few feet into the ground to prevent escape. The perimeter of this area will have an 8-foot-tall security fence. It will be chain link with acoustical curtains attached, so it will appear to be solid from the outside, and the acoustical curtains will also help address any potential sound. And then it will also be planted additionally by trees and shrubs that do not exist right now. The entire fenced habitat area is approximately 1,800 square feet and would represent about 8% of the 5-acre property.
Clarification, Madam Chair.
Sure. Go ahead.
You mentioned the acoustical curtain. The current condition left that kind of open in the event there were noise issues, but what you just stated is that the condition the planning department recommends on this is separate and apart from the ZA, is that curtain be installed as a part of the permitting process initially without any pre-qualification, that you'd have to have some noise complaint in order to revisit that?
They offered that, and so part of the zoning administrator hearing was an adoption of an exhibit of a number of standards that they offered, so that is an Exhibit F.
Okay, so that would be part of, that's what's coming to us as part of the,
yes, it is
the appeal,
one of,
but that's what's, okay, I want to be clear.
It is one of the stamped and signed exhibits that they offered, and then we conditioned the project to follow all of those items.
If what happens, it's a matter, okay,
yes.
Thanks.
That's my understanding.
Yes, thank you.
These photos are examples of the kinds of things that could be used. that it might look like once built. The upper building on the left is a steel building, ag-type building. It's not built yet, so that's not actually it. There is a picture of the closest neighbor view, what it might look like after construction. There is an example of a photo of an aerial runway, and that's the only photo of a squirrel monkey I have in this PowerPoint. Sorry, we didn't load it up with squirrel monkey photos. In the aerial on the bottom left there. There's a somewhat dark photo, kind of hard to read, of habitats and an example of a double locked entry. The monkeys will be kept in the indoor shelter between the hours of 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. on weekdays and 8 p.m. to 9 a.m. on weekends. And again, that is in that Exhibit F. It was something that was offered by the applicant as part of the ZA hearing, and so it is conditioned to do that. Access to the outdoor habitat areas is through an elevated caged runway and through that double-locked entry system.
Could you give those hours again, Leanne?
Sure. So the hours that they can go outside or they cannot go outside, are 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. on weekdays.
Okay.
And they cannot go outside from 8 p.m. to 9 a.m. on weekends.
Very good, thanks.
Oh, sorry. So a little bit about the process. The applicants did initially approach planning about what kind of entitlement would be required, and staff determined that the use met the definition of a kennel, and therefore it needed a conditional use permit to the zoning administrator. At staff's suggestion, the applicant held an early workshop before the Southeast Area CPAC that was held on April 27, 2017. At that point, they were exploring 2 different locations. They submitted a formal application for this site on May 25th, 2017, and the CPAC heard the item on August 24th, 2017. There were neighbor concerns expressed at both the early workshop and the CPAC meeting. I'm going to go through some of those specific issues on upcoming slides. They also held an open house on their property at 2 dates. And then at the August 24th CPAC meeting, the CPAC felt that the concerns had been addressed, and they did recommend approval of the project on a 4-0 vote with 2 members absent. The zoning administrator hearing of March 21st was held. There was an initial staff report to the zoning administrator. A number of comments came in. There was an addendum report prepared. Those are both attached to your board report. There were 9 members of the public who spoke in opposition and 1 member in support. Condition number 2 was revised in the addendum as a result of some of those concerns, and that's where it gets tied, the conditions get tied to some of those exhibits, including that Exhibit F. So on March 21st, the zoning administrator adopted the negative declaration and approved the conditional use permit with the revised conditions. So going through some of the topics that have come through the process and some of the concerns, starting with the land use compatibility and the zoning code definition. This is on page 3 of your board report. The full definition is in your board report, but it includes the provision of shelter and care for small animals on a commercial basis, including activities such as feeding, exercise, grooming, and incidental medical care. Squirrel monkeys vary in size from 1.5 to 2.5 pounds, so staff felt that they were a small animal. We didn't consider them a pet, so we thought it was that they needed a use permit. We thought it was better classified as a kennel than just someone's backyard pet, so we did conclude that it would trigger a conditional use permit to the zoning administrator. With regard to traffic, we did have DOT look at the potential number of trips that would be generated on site. The facility will not be open to the public. However, they have indicated there will be up to 2 employees in addition to the on-site residents. So the estimated daily trips are 6 trips per day with a maximum of 10 trips per day because there may be deliveries, inspections, and waste pickup on some days. Based on that number of trips, Department of Transportation, and as validated in the CEQA document, it determined that there were not significant impacts to traffic and that traffic was negligible. With regard to wells and septics, planning staff did ask staff of environmental management to look at the wells and septic issues. They did not identify any potential impacts from the facility. The kennel facility will have its own dedicated septic system, and it will share a well with the primary residence. And the wells do meet setback requirements from adjacent wells. With regard to odor, there is a odor control plan. That plan requires absorbent bedding and mulch to be used both in the indoor and outdoor kennel areas to help trap and deodorize the kennels. The soiled bedding will be removed from the indoor kennels on a daily basis, and they'll be sanitized. This is more frequent than is required by the United States Department of Ag or the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries. The outdoor habitat will also have mulch for absorption of any waste. That will be cleaned and refreshed twice a week. All that mulch, animal waste, and bedding will be placed in heavy-duty plastic bags and put in a sealed commercial dumpster. That dumpster is picked up weekly. With regard to noise, we did look at noise quite a bit.
Could I interrupt you, Leanne?
Yes.
Where's the dumpster located? Is it on the property?
It's on the property. I don't know where on the property.
Back by the barn or something?
I would have to ask the
All right.
applicant. I'm sorry,
We'll
I don't
find out later.
know exactly where. Let's see, noise. Pursuant to county standards, we did noise measurements and established the thresholds. Thresholds are measured from the noise source to the adjacent residential outdoor activity area to further ensure that noise was not an issue. An analysis of predicted noise level at the property line of the subject property was analyzed, as well as single event measurements were conducted. The noise analysis indicated that the anticipated noise generated by the monkeys is significantly lower than the county's noise thresholds and the existing ambient noise levels. And those measurements are shown on the graphic on the slide. And then I already talked a bit about the when the animals can go outside.
Just, can I ask a question?
Tully?
Yes.
It goes to some of the concerns about, probably not so much about odor, but issues have been raised by adjacent residents and others about any disease transmission. But the reason I'm asking the question is that there was a suggestion, and I think you touched on it, about the type of material that would be underlying the outdoor habitat areas. And it was suggested, and I know I inquired about, the use of concrete there, and obviously you've done some checking. I've seen some correspondence as it relates to that. But in the opposite to that, is there some ability, I trust, that if that wasn't under some conditions that we might consider, if we were going to consider approving this, that we could have some compaction standards and have certain base requirements for that, so that the permeability would be far less than if it was just, DG, 2 inches DG on top of native soil, that type of thing. It wouldn't necessarily be the hard surface that, some have asked for. But I think, some of that goes to the concerns about, what underlies mulch, recognizing the mulch is supposed to be the absorbent material for waste materials generated by the animals. So has there been any, going back to the point you made earlier about, saying that concrete was not recommended, not a part of the current condition, but coming forward to the discussion we're going to have today, and we're going to hear on this later, has there been some thought given to what we might require if they're going to use, say, non-native material, i.e. DG, as to what depth? And I don't want to parse it too much closely right now. Obviously, we're going to hear from folks on this, but I'm just curious.
Well, I think what we've looked at is the county did engage with an independent expert from the Oakland Zoo, separate from the applicant. So we had someone to ask our questions of that was not part of the applicant team. And what we really asked about is what are the standards underlying these kinds of habitats. And we didn't really get information about lining it in terms of protecting, the groundwater. It's more in terms of the safety of the monkeys. You don't want cement. as I vaguely understand, I am certainly not a primatologist or a zoo expert in any way, shape, or form. When it builds up below the cement, that actually causes problems and makes things worse because you can't really clean it very well. And you have to figure out how to clean it and sanitize it. And that actually apparently over time has shown to be a worse result than having a natural
harbor certain bacteria or whatever. But
yeah.
But as far as they stand, so again,
I don't have information.
Okay,
on what would be better.
I plant that question. We're going to hear from folks. I mean, it's in the correspondence and so forth, but that may be something we're going to want to check on.
I mean, our analysis so far is that trying to trap as much of the waste as possible with the mulch and removing it is the standard practice, and the degree to which they're removing that is more frequent than is called for in a variety of guidelines.
Okay, thanks.
With regard to proximity to wells, we do have some graphics here that show the proposed kennel area in green and the relationship and distance of the kennel to various wells. Again, we had environmental management staff, because this is their area of expertise, look at this. They felt that there was adequate separation from the facility to adjacent wells. They also looked into neighbor complaints about whether any wells were going dry out there and whether there were other issues with septic systems. They did not find any documented reports of well or septic issues in vicinity of the project site. And the location of the kennel to the closest adjacent resident is 350 feet, and there are other residences approximately 810 feet away. That is similar to the distance that residences are located from the PAWS facility, about 7 miles to the southwest. So we did look at that facility as one of the few examples that we have in the county, albeit not exactly the same. It is sort of the closest thing.
There are some larger parcels around the PAWS facility. There are some 2 acres, but there's also 20-acre parcels, and it is on a public street. Yeah. Okay.
And the initial study, pages 23 through 27, also have more information specifically on noise. One of the other comments had to do with potential effects on an adjacent or a man-made pond that is on this 5-acre property. The pond was man-made. It's not a natural pond. It's fed by an on-site well. It has typically been kept wet, so it's like a stock pond. It is stocked with mosquito fish and has a population of bullfrogs. The proposed kennel is approximately 200 feet from the pond. There were concerns about whether this pond would have fairy shrimp or California tiger salamander, and we have linked into that, and the characteristics of the pond do not lend itself to those kinds of features. And so based on the pond itself, we don't feel those species exist, and based on the distance from the pond to the project, we don't believe there's any environmental impact on that pond. With regard to vector control and disease transfer, the project is required to meet United States Department of Agricultural vector control protocols, and we are not aware of rodents being a cause of disease, or monkeys being a cause of disease in rodents. I think that might be the other way around. These are New World monkeys, and perhaps you'll hear more about that. There is a emergency prevention plan as it pertains to monkeys escaping. The monkeys will be certified by a veterinarian to be disease-free. We understand the transmission of any diseases and viruses from monkeys to human is very low. The cages and enclosures are manufactured by companies that make cages and enclosures for zoos. Therefore, escapes are very unlikely. The applicant has provided an emergency safety plan, a zoonotic disease program, and a succession plan. And protocols by USDA and California Department of Fish and Wildlife are required. That's also covered in condition number 2 and condition number 20. The facility is not open to the general public. The applicant intends to be accredited by the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries, which would also prohibit it to be open to the general public. And condition number 4 restricts the facility from being open to the public, further reducing the risk of escape or transfer of diseases. The residents will be the primary caretakers of the monkeys, along with 2 employees. One resident is a licensed veterinarian, and one is a primatologist. A maximum of 55 squirrel monkeys that are retired from research will be housed at the facility. A third-party zoologist, I indicated a minute ago, did review application materials for us and deemed the project consistent with industry standards, that the risk of escape, transfer of disease, and risk of aggression and attack is low if the protocols are followed. And we don't have any issues of complaints being filed on the other animal sanctuary in the southeast area. A negative declaration was prepared for the project, posted initially for a 20-day review, but that was extended to 30 days based on comments from the neighbors. And I think I've covered most of the rest of this. Staff is recommending we do acknowledge there is concerns by the neighbors, and the project is viewed unfavorably by several residents in the surrounding neighborhood. However, from the staff analysis, we've concluded that the project meets or exceeds the standards that we've been able to identify, and we have concluded that the findings can be made. The initial study and negative declaration determined that impacts could be addressed, and that the project would not result in any significant or potentially significant effects on the environment. So staff is recommending today that the board deny the appeal, adopt the negative declaration, and approve the conditional use permit with conditions. But we are, of course, open to further dialogue and questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Natoli.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple questions I know we want to hear from folks. So there's been very recent information received as recently as earlier this afternoon, and we may hear some of that entered into the record as it relates to biological assessments, and both the appellant and the applicant have submitted information as it relates to, I guess, supplemental information in addition to what we had in the reports that have come forward to us via Department of Environmental Review. Has there been a chance for staff? I mean, so this has been, again, just received it in the last 4 or 5 hours. So
right.
Has there been any chance to examine this? And if so, any thoughts?
Staff have been looking at the materials as they've come in, particularly Wendy Hartman and Tim Hawkins. I don't think any of the materials that have been submitted so far have raised significant concerns on staff's part, but obviously, there's always an opportunity for us to look at those further. I don't think anything submitted isn't stuff that we've already been looking at.
Again, and we have competing information, and again, I'm not going to challenge the accuracy or confirm the accuracy of any of that. Obviously, I'm not a biologist. I just, again, knowing that something's been late received, and both parties are represented by legal counsel, and we have biologists that have weighed in, and obviously others who have certainly interest, whether from a neighborhood perspective or a community perspective, and or know about primatology and other such things. I guess let me ask Krista then. Krista, in the staff report, because this gets to us on the CEQA determination, and obviously the discussion about the whether this is equivalent to a kennel. Again, I don't want to get ahead of folks, but I just want to recognize that on page 4 of the staff report, they go through the various decisions that were made relative to the environmental documentation, kind of the various levels, everything from a full environmental impact statement to a mitigated negative declaration and a negative declaration on down to exempt and such. Is there anything that you've seen in the record thus far that you would have offered counsel to our folks that some further scoping should have been done or anything? Are you comfortable, at least at this juncture, from what you know, beyond what we might hear today?
I have reviewed all the documents, including the neg deck, and I did not see any reason why an EIR should have been prepared. I think the document that staff prepared was the appropriate document for this project.
Okay. And as a part of our deliberations today and discussion, based upon what we hear and again have read and understand, we could ask for supplemental information or ask that certain things be looked at and as a part of the body of information in considering the appeal. Is that Is that something that's before us?
I think the question is what you and I talked about in advance of the hearing, which is if there are additional matters that the board would like to have examined, environmental issues, one option, of course, is for the board to direct preparation of an EIR, but that's not necessarily required and certainly is expensive and time-consuming. Another option is simply to add mitigation measures to the project or conditions of approval to the project to take care of any concerns that come up without having to send it back for further environmental review.
So that is an option that's open to us today. Okay. All right. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Any other questions at this point? Okay, thank you. We'll hear from the appellant. Mr. Mooney, are you the appellant, in fact, for the Clonch family?
Yes.
Okay.
But we have, it was unclear exactly how much time we had as the appellant, and I tried to communicate with staff, and I was told it was up to the discretion of the chair.
Yeah. Since you're the appellant, I think 10 minutes. Everyone else will have your turn at 2 minutes.
We were hoping for more like 20 minutes. Again, this is something I tried to clarify with staff ahead of time, but
I'll split the difference with you at 15.
Okay. We'll go quickly. Thank you, Chair Peters and Supervisors. My name is Don Mooney. I'm here on behalf of Don and Zena Clonch, and we have Don and Zena Clonch will be talking in a bit, as well as Diane Moore, a biologist, with regards to the biological issues that were addressed. One of the things I did want to bring up, though, is I wanted to really focus my part on the allowable land use. This is not an allowable land use, and part of that is based upon the definition that they have relied upon, the chapter 7.3 of kennel, cattery, and small animal boarding and training. And the last sentence of that definition talks about the provision of shelter and care for small animals on a commercial basis, including activities. This is not a commercial basis. This is not a commercial activity. This is a wildlife sanctuary. This is a zoo. They're consulting with zoo experts. Staff even indicated, well, we're not zoo experts, so we had to go out and get zoo experts to look at this. There's nothing commercial about this facility. The comment letters that the staff that's been received all talked about this as a wildlife sanctuary. It's also not a training facility. The allowable use under the table is a small animal boarding and training. And it uses the word and training. So that means the training is to go along with it. And as we indicated in our letter, the training requires certain things. Requires the owners of the animals to be on site.
Could I ask you to pause? Is this your presentation that's up on the screen?
It will be Mr. Clonch's presentation.
Eventually.
Yes.
It will be. Okay.
Yes, it is.
I wasn't sure
Yes,
whether
it
it was.
is.
It didn't have a name on it, so.
Okay. Thank you, though.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And so as we indicated, this is not the zoning code. Well, it may have contemplated these small animal boarding facilities with training allowed in these types of areas. There's nothing in the zoning code that envisioned or contemplated a wildlife sanctuary on a small parcel in an ag residential area. Again, this is a zoo. This is taking on the characteristics of a zoo, of a wildlife sanctuary. It's not for commercial purposes. It simply does not meet that standard as an allowable use within this. And then I'll touch briefly on the CEQA issue, because it sounds like I may not have time to come up with the other folks. We believe with low threshold, CEQA has a low threshold for preparation of an EIR. And if you have disagreement among experts about a project's potential impacts, this is not the stage where the county gets to say, well, we're going to go with this expert versus that expert. If you have expert opinion, in this case particularly in the biological resources, that is based upon facts, and the facts in the case, and their expert opinion, is this project has the potential for potentially significant impacts to biological resources, that meets the standard for an EIR. And so the requirement here is met. And again, if I haven't seen other biological resource information that's been provided, but by the other side, but even if it contradicts the biological information that has already been provided by Ms. Moore, and her testimony today and her submittal today, then that meets the threshold, substantial evidence supporting a fair argument of potential significant impacts to biological resources. That's the standard for the preparation of an EIR. And I do have a supplemental letter, but it really just covers what I talked about today, here today. And then now I'll bring up Don Clonch to do the PowerPoint presentation. And,
okay, if you want to give that letter to our clerk, she can hand it out. Thank you.
I have a hard copy of this also, if you'd like.
Okay. What, do you want to give that to the clerk so she can pass them out at the
Absolutely.
At the same time? Okay.
I think we have it done.
Mr. Clonch, if you would fill out a speaker sheet when you...
I did.
Well, you did. Well, I don't see it. I'll look for it talking then. And you need it, if you'd tell us you've been sworn.
Yes, ma'am, I have been sworn. I'll run through this relatively quickly. I know we don't have much time. First screen we come to is a quick rundown on squirrel monkeys from the World Animal Foundation website and their description of the animal. And if you notice there, even the smallest monkeys are incredibly strong and become unpredictable when they reach sexual maturity. Okay, that's just a little brief overview. Okay, if we move on here, what is the protocol that is established for any diseased monkeys? Do they remain in the main population? None of this is spelled out in any of the documentation that you've brought forth. It is also proven close quarters promote spread of disease in sanctuaries. Are we also to trust the information regarding animal health and animal numbers generated by the interest holder, the main interest holder of the facility? We need a little more accountability, as in county involvement. Okay, to step back once, the lead planner stated earlier that there has been no lowering of wells or any issue with local wells within several miles. That is a misstatement. As you'll see on the PowerPoint, there's 4 just within a very close area, all neighbors of ours that we have documentation of. He also stated there is no rodent to monkey disease transmission has ever been documented. That is also incorrect. I have it right here. You'll see following right there. Our street is a typical residential agricultural neighborhood. The sounds we would expect are what you are all used to out there. It's country, it's rural, we're used to that. 55 screaming monkeys is not part of an agricultural community. That is very different. And for these sound studies that are coming to the table, they may have been generated in a controlled environment, such as a zoo or a research facility. It's not the same thing. Even by their own admission, these monkeys will be out interacting with each other, playing. They're going to be very noisy. Okay, so your noise study really doesn't pull any weight right there. You also mentioned a neg deck that identifies protocols for the Sheriff's Department, CDFW, and Sac County Animal Control, yet no such protocols exist. They do not have them. This is a first for Sacramento County. We all know that. They don't have protocols for monkeys. Okay? In the Emergency Prevention and Action Plan, Attachment 14 under Exhibit 8 in your file, you refer to many Global Federation for Animal Sanctuary standards. Many of these are not met, and they are referred to here. You'll see them in there. 2 pages, the ones highlighted in red, are not addressed, and they are what you're referring to as the standard they're applying this to. Okay, the odor issue. Once again, to fully evaluate this odor issue, how can you do that when you're comparing a zoo or a controlled research facility? They're not the same thing. Okay, they're 2 total different animals. Okay, I work for one of the largest material suppliers in the United States. The permeability in the area we live in is almost non-existent. It is clay, okay? For these animals to be put on DG on top of clay, that's not going to work. We have standing water, we have groundwater issues there every winter. There's virtually no drainage. It's flat ground. It's flat farm ground. They need to be on concrete just to keep them and us safe. I appreciate the fact that you did mention pause. I'll jump right to it. Go right to the pause in its heyday when it had animals. Now it only has 2. Had 4 monkeys. That was the extent of their primates, period, on 30 acres. You'll notice in the rings there the amount of homes affected in a 500-foot radius, a 500 to 1,000, and 1,000 to 1,500. And then the next slide you'll see is a comparison to ours in the same distance. 3, 10, and 17 homes affected. Zoned A5, 55 monkeys on 5 acres. They had 4 monkeys on 30. So a comparison to pause is once again not acceptable. I won't run through the total summary because we're running out of time. I know you all have it in front of you. But we feel that we are opposed to it. However, if the county chooses to proceed, we have a list of the following conditions right there that we would like to discuss. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Don.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Klotch, I did find, speaker, there's 2 Don Klotch, are there 2 Don Klotches?
Oh, yes, there is.
Okay, all right. That was confusing, okay. And a Zena
Yep.
Klotch, okay.
I do need the overhead also.
Okay. Mr. Klotch, are you the Klotch from Valenson Road or Ripon, California?
Valenson.
Valenson, sorry. Okay. If stand in the middle of the 2 mic, pull them close together.
Over here?
Yeah, stand over there.
We have a handheld mic, though, if she needs it. If you want to try to do exhibits, I guess.
Okay. Hi, I'm Diane Moore. I'm a biologist with Moore Biological in Galt. I have my master's in ecology, and I'm a specialist in endangered species and wetlands. I've been a consultant for about 30 years. I want to talk about special status.
Diane, did you say I've been sworn?
I have been sworn.
Okay.
Yes.
And have you filled out a speaker sheet?
Do I go by what?
Have you completed a speaker sheet?
Yes, I did.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'll look for it. Usually they're all grouped together for the speakers at the beginning, so
Okay.
I just find it.
I'm here to talk about special status species. I sent you guys a pretty lengthy letter this morning. So the main issue here is the California tiger salamander. It does live in the area. It lives year-round underground. Okay, so this species doesn't just live in the pond. In fact, it spends very little time in the pond. It lives underground most of its life, like year-round, and then it will travel for up to a mile to go and breed in a pond for a few days, and then it will come back out and live underground. It lives underground, all over the place in grasslands in this area. Is the site within the range of the species? This is the range map on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's website. This is considered the species range. We are in it. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service identifies that both vernal pools and stock ponds, and including constructed stock ponds, provide breeding habitat for the species. So despite being a constructed stock pond, I myself have observed salamanders being captured in stock ponds as often as vernal pools. It's quite common. Next. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service standard, and this is planning guidance provided to planners, is that in order to assess whether or not a project could affect the species, you ask 3 key questions. Is the project within the species range? We know the answer to that. And they ask, what are the known localities? Are any salamanders known to be close next by? And then, are there any ponds on the site or near the site? Is there good habitat for the salamander to live underground in the site or near the site? Are there ponds near the site that salamanders could breed in and then travel and live underground on the site? So the answers to all these questions are, yes, it could be here. We are in the range. There's a potential breeding pond in the site, and I went and looked and found 7 within 1,000 feet of the site. I looked at them. I've got a couple of photographs of them. This shows the site in red and several other potential breeding ponds, some of which go dry in the summer and are optimal. Some of them are wet and probably have bullfrogs. Those are suboptimal, but bullfrogs and salamanders do co-occur, and I've observed that also after working with the species for over 25 years. Next, here's a picture of the pond on the site. This also provides habitat, breeding habitat, nesting habitat for the tricolored blackbird, which was listed last month as a state-listed species. This has not been evaluated, and there are over, I think, 20 records of colonies of tricolored blackbirds within a few miles of the site. And this is another potential breeding pond just a few hundred feet from the site. It looks optimal to me. It goes dry during the summer. It's very possible salamanders could occur in this area, and I know somebody who lives about a mile away who told me just a few years ago, I saw one of those. People's cats bring these into their house. There's no other salamander in the area. You can't miss it. So how would the project affect the salamander? It lives underground. Construction projects have potential to directly impact the salamander because you're excavating the soil, you're trenching. They are chopped up by backhoes all the time in construction sites. Usually the agencies require biologists to actually hand excavate every burrow, install fencing around sites, make sure that there's no salamanders in there. These are the types of things that need to be looked at. This has not been adequately addressed, and a biological assessment and some serious treatment of this really needs to be done. Thank you.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you. Are there other clonches to speak?
We have one more.
Okay.
Zena Clonch.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Zena Clonch, and I have been sworn.
Thank you.
And my plea to you is just as a community member. I've been there for 29 years. We lived there. It was going to be our forever home, and we like it there. We came to the country because we like the sounds of the country. Never in a million years would I think we would be here right now, and I wish we weren't. The thought of it scares me. Everywhere I look, there is a disease potential. I've looked on the Global Federation of American Sanctuaries that they often refer to, and it is all over there about diseases and how you protect from them and how you can't be in the same facility as they are. The waste should be treated as biohazardous waste, which is not what they're proposing to do. And the drainage needs to be assessed. The water needs to be analyzed, and the ground needs to be analyzed annually. So none of these things are in the environmental document. They're not in their plans. They're not in the assessment. And I think that those are in place from the Global Federation to protect people that live around these places. This is, you know, I just want to live in the country peacefully like I do with my family, and I really don't want to be next to the zoo and have all of this potential hazard be affecting my family and the way that we live right now. I really would love for it to be my forever home. Thank you very much for listening to this appeal and considering our concerns.
Good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mooney, do you have a closing?
I'll just conclude by saying that, you know, again, this is not an allowable land use. This is a wildlife sanctuary. This is a zoo in a residential ag area. This is not what was contemplated by the zoning code. It's quite clear that the zoning code was contemplating, if to the extent it was a small animal boarding facility, something that dealt with training, commercial purposes, things of that nature. And again, the testimony by Ms. Moore meets that threshold requirement for the preparation of an EIR. And so an EIR, if the county was decided to go forward with this, we believe an EIR would be necessary.
Okay.
And just for a clarification, will we have an opportunity for a reply at the conclusion of the applicants?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Before you leave, I think Mr. Cerna has a question for you.
Yeah,
Yes.
I just need some clarification since your opening statement was really focused on the land use part of this from your perspective or the perspective of your client. I just want to make sure I'm not misreading you. If this were in fact a commercial operation, would your client be more satisfied with it as a commercial operation?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
But it's not necessarily a commercial operation. And
I just want to make sure that, because that you're putting a lot into commercial versus non-commercial, and it almost sounded like that there would be some sense of relief if it was a commercial operation.
No.
Okay.
But what I'm doing is I'm focusing on
that's all I need
the definition in the code.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to now go to speakers from the public, and you'll each have 2 minutes. I have 25 or 30 of you here that wish to speak, so we're going to...
The applicant.
Oh, well, usually in one of these, we don't have the applicant speak, I didn't think.
Yeah, I think it would be appropriate to have the applicant have a few moments.
I don't have anything that says that, so...
I'm sorry, yep. So.
I don't know who the applicant is.
That would be Nick Avdis on behalf of the applicant, yes.
Madam Chair, Nick Avdis with the Thomas Law Group on behalf of Paul and Christine Buckmaster in Squirrel Monkey Haven. If I could get, do have a PowerPoint presentation. If I can get that up, I'd appreciate that.
And have you already filled out a speaker sheet and I just haven't found it yet?
I didn't realize I had to fill out a speaker sheet as a
It would be
representative of
helpful.
I will fill out a speaker sheet, and I have been sworn.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Again, I appreciate the opportunity to be before you today to talk about Squirrel Monkey Haven. Really, what Squirrel Monkey Haven represents, it's the life passion of Dr. Paul and Christine Buckmaster, both affiliated with Stanford University, but acting really in their personal and individual capacities. This is not sanctioned in any way by Stanford. They do specialize in the study of primates, in particular squirrel monkeys. So in the past, when squirrel monkeys, as well as other animals, have completed their role in scientific research, those animals were euthanized. They were killed. Even if the research that they were involved in was with non-infectious disease research or non-terminal condition research. Among the scientific community, there appears to be a universal acceptance now that animals that were once used in research and for whom humans have benefited from so much should not be killed when they are no longer useful. In fact, I think you can sum it up that many scientists feel that we owe quite a duty to these animals that have in fact advanced the understandings of human behavior and other attributes. And really what retirement for these animals means is a home to live out the rest of their lives in health and comfort. And this is, in fact, what the Buckmasters believe with regards to the concept of establishing Squirrel Monkey Haven. They understand that there aren't enough of these retirement facilities in the country, and many monkeys are being needlessly killed. That's the reason, again, for the Squirrel Monkey Haven and what their folks, the Buckmasters, have dedicated their lives to, including quite a bit of their own personal fortune. In fact, the home that they purchased here in this instance, in fact, was paid for, was not mortgaged, and are obviously facing litigation in this matter and are willing to obviously proceed with that as they believe very much in what they're doing. Part of the reason that the Buckmasters chose Sacramento County was, in fact, it seemed that the county was very much welcoming of animal welfare causes. In fact, PAWS has been identified and referred to in a few instances, and in fact really forms the basis for why they chose this area. There was an acceptance of PAWS where over the years there have been lions, tigers, bears, coyotes, bobcats, you name it, monkeys, they've been there. And
Elephants.
And elephants, Supervisor Natoli, you're well familiar with, no doubt. The project, there's been extensive outreach. The project had gone to CPAC, received unanimous approval, and also received approval at the zoning administrator. So obviously, Mr. Mooney identified several concerns. I'll quickly dispense with some of these. Frankly, the inconsistency with the county code, I've addressed this. I submitted a letter for the zoning administrator, equally relevant here. The county is well within their prerogative to interpret their zoning code to allow this use with a conditional use permit. There's also the matters related to noise. We have Ballard Acoustical Consultants here, a representative to answer any questions you may have on the noise issue. They specialize, obviously, in acoustical engineering with particular specialized experience in animal facilities. We're going to talk about odor, the threat to public health and safety, impact to biological resources. I'll touch on that, but really meritless claim, and the facility administration and oversight on an ongoing basis. I'll quickly touch through those. Again, extensive acoustical analysis was done. I can go through all this. Staff did a pretty good job. The reality is that the noise analysis concluded that the noise generated by this project is significantly below county standards. Supervisor Natoli, to your point regarding the acoustical curtains, it was not our understanding. I quickly reviewed the conditions, and maybe staff can confirm. Acoustical curtains are something that's contemplated as and as an addition if necessary, but currently as conditioned does not require the installation of acoustical curtains at the outset. Certainly there is a mechanism should there be legitimate complaints about noise. A significant investment will be made in these commercial grade acoustical curtains to hopefully address that issue should that be an ongoing one. In terms of odor, we're really talking about urine and waste. Again, staff did a good job of going through this. Happy to answer any specific questions, but I'll be honest, I've raised cattle, sheep, pigs, pigs being the most filthy of the animals, frankly, and come nowhere close. I mean, the fact that you have, in essence, 100 pounds of biomass, 51 monkeys is about 100 pounds of monkey. And obviously the amount of total feces and urine per day is a drop, literally a drop in the bucket. Public health and safety, I'd also like to draw your attention to the letter that was submitted by the UC Davis California National Primate Center. The letter goes into extensive detail in terms of their vetting of this project. As you may know, the Primate Center just outside of the city of Davis has approximately 4,000 monkeys and did have a significant colony of squirrel monkeys at one time. I think the bottom line here is that really the threat, the risk of communication of any diseases to humans is astronomically low, and really is really a non-issue in this case. And again, I will call up Ms. Buckmaster, the primatologist, to discuss the issues raised by the appellant related to some of those diseases, particular cowpox. With regards to public safety, really talking about escape, I think really the letter from UC Davis, again, the Primate Center, the gold standard when it comes to monkey research, has not been aware of a single instance where a squirrel monkey has escaped captivity in the United States and attacked people. I mean, it's just a gross sensationalization of what these monkeys are capable of. In terms of biological resources, again, provided supplemental report by Vargas Environmental. With all due respect to Ms. Moore, she has not been out to the site. We had it thoroughly investigated. There have been no instances of California tiger salamander, nor is it suitable habitat. And in fact, we're not doing anything to the pond. We're 200 feet away. So the notion that this presents any sort of impact that justifies any environmental impact is absurd, and frankly, people in the Galt area should be appalled and concerned about any expansion to any of their agricultural activities should the claims that Ms. Moore is making be even remotely true. In any event, with regards to the facility oversight administration, there is a board of directors. This is a 501c3 nonprofit. The executive director is, in fact, Chris Buckmaster. Mr. and Mrs. Buckmaster will live on the site. Currently, Dr. Buckmaster's parents live on the site. Veterinary care will be overseen by several outside veterinarians that are listed there. It will have 2 employees, and as well as succession planning in place, as well as zoonotic disease protocols, escape protocols. This project has been examined every which way to Sunday and has met every standard known to mankind. In terms of outreach, significant outreach done in the community. Again, won't go through all that. All the outreach and through the planning process, what it resulted in is a reduction of the barn size, about 50%, reduction of the height of the building, significant increase in landscaping around the monkey facility, limited outdoor hours, obviously prohibiting tours to members of the public or anyone, installed a dedicated septic system for the monkey barn, and a reduction in the overall population from 75 monkeys to 55 monkeys. So in any event, with conclusion, and I'm going to hand it over to Chris Buckmaster, who, Chris, if you can come up so we can get in here under the wire. has the support of many neighbors. We understand we can't please everybody. We understand that there's concerns, but in my opinion, it's really, when you look at this rationally and objectively and logically, this is a fine addition to the Galt community, and in fact, folks won't even know it's there once it's established. Has the support of many zoos, the support of the University of California, Davis. PAWS has existed in the area peacefully for many, many decades. I mean, this is really a zoo-quality facility that's been thoroughly analyzed. So with that, I do want to invite Chris Buckmaster to come up to the podium to address some of the behavioral issues, the disease protocol, and just one.
Thank you.
I have a speaker's
At last. Okay. You give that to the clerk, Ms. Ravdis?
I will.
Chris Buckmaster, I have been sworn.
Thank you.
I'm a primatologist, and as Nick said, I work at Stanford University, but I'm acting as a private citizen right now. In terms of the behavioral issues, so one of the reasons why squirrel monkeys are used in research is because they're very gentle and they do not pose a health risk to humans. In terms of our zoonotic disease protocols, so we follow the same protocols as the American Zoo and Aquarium Association, Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries, the AVMA, and we also have like a foundation of what we do in the research world, which is very stringent in terms of zoonotic prevention, which is in squirrel monkeys, because they're New World monkeys, very, very low to begin with. But the standard procedures are any incoming monkeys must have a health certificate provided by a veterinarian, an independent veterinarian, not us. When they come in, we house them separately for a while indoors in a quarantine-like situation and have health checks done just to make certain that there are no health issues. If the health issue arises, we contact the veterinarians, they do an assessment, and based on that, we proceed with either treatment, contact with outside veterinarians for consultant as well, and then we proceed from there. In terms of the diseases that were listed early on, herpes virus is an old world monkey issue. It is not an issue for New World monkeys like squirrel monkeys. And we also do annual TB exams, TB testing for the squirrel monkeys, and that's not because they are natural carriers of it, it's because it's a concern that we could give it to them, so we also have annual TB testing, just like one would have if they work in a hospital with human patients. We also require staff and myself to have measles, mumps, and rubella titer or vaccine done as well, and flu vaccines, just because we don't want to give these monkeys who could be susceptible to our diseases any diseases, kind of like a reverse zoonotic situation. In terms of the cowpox that was mentioned on the additional list, so it is true that some monkeys did get some cowpox virus from in the Netherlands and in Europe from rodents, but that disease is not found in the U.S., and it's just it's an issue in Europe and Asia, and so although that's true, we wouldn't expect anything like that here. Okay.
All right. We're happy to answer any questions, but thank you again.
Okay, any questions for the applicant? Don't see any. Thank you. Oh, wait, sorry, Sue Frost?
I just wondered if you could speak to the work that the monkeys have done and your research and what you've learned about humans. I thought it was interesting to know, and whether or not these monkeys have had medications or, been injected with disease or any of that type of research.
Yes, no, as stated in all the documentation, these monkeys were not involved in infectious disease research. They were involved in behavioral and neuroimaging research. So what we did is we provided them early on with a mildly stressful situation that was copable. So we separated them for an hour once a week for 10 weeks from their natal group, their moms and other peers in the group. And then later on, we did that before around 6 to 8 months of age, and then after that, at years 1, 2, and 3, we did behavior testing, and there are a number of different types of behavior testing. Mostly, to capture it in a general way, it's decision making. And then we correlated the decision-making ability with the neuroimaging scans that we did, which was MRI, which is the same thing that humans get for diagnostics. And in fact, we use the same research MRI system that the human research subjects use. So we did that at year 1, 2, and 3, and we found that the monkeys that experienced the copable stress situation had robust changes in their brain in terms of volume of brain regions that are responsible for stress resilience, and also the connections from the back part of the brain to the front. We found that in the monkeys that experienced the mild stressor against the control monkeys who didn't. And then at 13 years later, we did exactly the same thing. We did the behavior testing and the imaging again and found that these robust changes in the monkeys that experienced a copable stress were still remained later on. And that's something, so the important thing with that is that people had an intuitive sense that that was the case, but we just showed scientifically that yes, it was the case, that if you experience mild copable stress when you're young, you have brain changes that are robust and allow you to deal with stressors later on in life, and that change lasts well into middle age.
That's so interesting to me.
Mr. Nuttall, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. I just also wanted to ask you regarding their daily routine. Is there a reason why you have them go in at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night versus earlier? And if you have them go in earlier, are they going to be feeling pent up and more anxious? Or once they go into that building, do they just go to sleep and sleep longer? Do you hear do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand.
That was one of the questions that they wanted to see them go in by 6 p.m. versus 8 p.m., which is what you had suggested. Right.
So one of the absolutely wonderful and amazing things for the sanctuary that we can provide the monkeys is we can provide them choice. When they're in the research environment, we do a lot to enrich their environment and to make their living conditions really happy, and we are very concerned about their welfare in terms of providing things to enrich their lives. But one of the things that is missing in the research environment is the monkeys don't have a lot of control over their life, making decisions on, when we kind of set the schedule for them. The great thing about the sanctuary environment is that it restores their life, and that they make all of the choices and decisions on their own. We don't, there are times when we have to sanitize and we have to shift them either in or out, of course, so we control them on those occasions. But for the most part, we let them live their lives in peace and make their own decisions. And that brings me to some of these pictures are absolutely adorable, and especially with the monkeys on the people, you can see the size difference, but the sanctuaries have a no contact policy, so we would not be allowing any of these monkeys jumping on us. We want them to be monkeys. We leave them alone for the most part. So I want to just point that out too while we're here.
That was my fault. I actually really enjoyed looking for those monkey pictures. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question, but it's of staff. Should I ask it now or later?
May I?
Oh, are you not? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I got off on a tangent. Sorry.
Okay.
So what I wanted to say is, we wanted to provide them the opportunity to go in and out when they wanted to, but because there was some concern about noise, we agreed to, locking them in near sunset, which is automatically they would come inside during sunset and go to sleep. And once they're asleep, they're asleep. have little murmur chit-chats with one another while they're asleep, but they don't make noise because they are a prey species. So once it's dark outside, they go to shelter and they just stay there until morning. If it was up to the monkeys, they would go outside early in the morning and look for bugs, and they would stay out until sunset and look for bugs. So we're just going to compress that time frame so that to address any neighbor concerns.
Okay.
And
but it won't make them more, I mean, if they're asking you to put them in at 6 p.m., what you're saying is ideally, hopefully we can let them relax, and if it's not bothering people, we won't have to worry about it, basically.
If we need to lock them in at 6 or 8, they'll be fine. We give them plenty of things to do in the indoors as well.
Okay. And then I just had a question of staff, and that was that I received some complaints that at the CPAC meeting, there was a hearing that wasn't notified at the correct time, and so there were opponents to this that came a half hour later, but the meeting had already started, and so I wondered if you could speak to that.
Yes, I do have some times written down somewhere. The item was, the notices went out, I believe, for 7:30. The meeting started at 7. There were several other items on the agenda beforehand, so the chair of the CPAC took those first. I think the chair and people started arriving around 7:15. I think the chair did start this item about 5 minutes before the 7:30 notice time. And that, I believe, was discussed at the CPAC meeting, but the chair felt that everyone had a chance to understand the project and hear it. And therefore, despite that maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes starting point beforehand, the chair determined that didn't affect the outcome of the meeting and felt that everyone had a chance to testify, and they went ahead and voted that night.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I think the vote occurred a little after 8:10 or 8:05, something like that. So,
Leanne, could I ask you to move to a microphone that works?
Yes.
Thank you. Is that all your questions? Great. Mr. Natoli?
Yeah, I'll be brief. I want to hear from all the folks that are here today, and then we can have some more deliberation discussion. But I just wanted to ask Christine, and certainly just have our Director of Animal Care be prepared a little later on, going to be thinking about the engagement, because I know we have an annual permitting process through Animal Care that for certain animal species. But my question to you, Christine, is, I think I know the answer, but I want to be clear about it for some of the reasons that we've heard, seen in correspondence. So each of the monkeys has a file or portfolio that goes with them. I mean, from the time they were born to the time that they would arrive at the Monkey Haven. That information, as I understand it, obviously it's entrusted to you as the caretakers, but that could be made available to Animal Care.
Yes.
And be publicly available, so folks, you described it, you were doing brain research or reaction. It wasn't serum injection and so forth, but you would know, because this colony of monkeys obviously are the ones that you're bringing there, but
yes.
This current permit, as it comes from the zoning administrator, allows for other monkeys then to be added on, and so there would be over time the potential for other monkeys to, I guess, petition to come up to the whatever limit was set. Obviously, it's 55 is being recommended, but that information would be current and would be available. It could be available to Animal Care as maybe the holder of information, so that anybody in public, whether it was a neighbor or you or anybody in the audience or any interested party, could gain access to see, what the information, again, that anything that wouldn't be proprietary, I guess, but obviously they're going to be located there. So is that correct, though, that there is a file, portfolio, whatever it is that follows the monkey?
Yes, it would be, probably a summary would be more easy to provide to the Animal Care Services, that we welcome their interaction, their inspection, and their keeping of our record, copies of our records.
Okay, and just one other follow-on question then, because it's been raised, and I know both you and Paul and obviously a lot of folks that have written to us are veterinarians, and so obviously you have that expertise, and certainly in working with this colony monkeys, but we have veterinarians that are on staff at the Animal Care, and so assuming that there was a procedure agreed upon, there could be review by our veterinarians. May not have the expertise certainly with monkeys, but certainly our veterinarians that are certified to review those files if there was a question that were to arise.
Yes, I welcome all veterinary input. My style of care is I like consensus, so I like multiple people's input before I make a decision.
Yeah, and it's not so much about questioning. I think it's if some folks are calling for somebody else to look at it besides you and Paul and the folks that are working.
Of course, yes.
We have veterinarians that are. And again, I throw that out because that may not be what we normally would do. Obviously, this is not a common request, but one that's before us. So I wanted to be clear on that. Okay,
yes.
thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have one last question. Why 55? Why not 15? Or 20 or 10?
Because the current population is 51, and so our original barn design was double that, so we had to diminish the number of monkeys that we could house, which we feel is doable in terms of funding. And it's also the reason why we want to have a little bit more extra space is because our mission is to provide homes to monkeys that can be retired. So we want to have as many as we can that's responsible and agreed upon by the county and acceptable to the neighbors to a certain extent.
And I would just add that there's a significant investment, obviously, hundreds of thousands of dollars going into this facility, and there are not many of them, so the number is commensurate with the size of the facility.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Chris? Okay, now the public gets to speak. We do have a 2-minute limit, so it looks like you're all in the same category of support. So if you could try and think of something new that we haven't heard of before. You can say ditto to the previous speaker, whatever you like, but let's talk about something different than the people before you did, if you could. So I'll read out a couple names at a time so you can get ready to come to the podium. First speaker is Amanda Lofton, then Michael Stasky, then Don Clonch. A different Don Clonch, evidently. Okay.
Hi.
And state your name and that you've been sworn.
Hi, I'm Amanda Lofton. I'm currently a student of veterinary medicine at the University of California, Davis. I had the pleasure of working with Dr. Paul Buckmaster this past summer at Stanford University. He has mentored many students, such as myself, and has trained many of us who want to pursue veterinarian scientist training. I can attest that he will hold this facility to the highest standards and be compliant with all veterinary regulations. And he is a phenomenal and respectable researcher and will be a great role model to many of us and provide a invaluable educational resource through this facility.
Thank you, Amanda. Next speaker is Michael Stasky, then Don Clonch, then Lauren Hemingway.
Hi, good afternoon. So I'm Michael Starkey. Apologize for the handwriting,
sorry.
But I am sworn. So, so I am a wildlife biologist, and I've actually worked with special status species in the Central Valley with an emphasis on tiger salamanders. While they can move quite a bit, salamanders have very specific habitat requirements, and the pond, after reviewing the documents that were presented by Sacramento County and the independent consulting firm, there's really, it's not the best habitat that's presented. One, not only are the bullfrogs predatory towards adult salamanders and larvae, but it's stocked with mosquito fish, would actually eat salamander eggs, which is a big problem. So typically salamanders aren't going to be utilizing that habitat because if they do happen to get there and breed, the eggs are going to be eaten and thus recruitment cannot continue. But regardless, the project is far from the initial site. And I just wanted to also touch on that I have had the privilege to see squirrel monkeys in the wild. And have you heard them before? Squirrel monkeys?
I haven't.
Okay, they sound like happy birds. And so just to put that kind of into mind about how squirrel monkeys sound compared to maybe like a chimpanzee, which I think people, when they hear monkey, they think of it, which is an ape. They're actually quite quiet, calm individuals.
I was hoping someone would have a recording of the...
I thought about it, but I thought that'd be a little inappropriate.
YouTubed it, okay.
So check it out on YouTube. But just lastly, so what Squirrel Monkey Haven is doing, and it truly is something that's needed. There are very few rescue centers that can provide this service by providing animals that are retired from research, and we owe these animals a debt. And in this facility, they'll be kept in a way that's more natural compared to their research life. So thank you, and I urge you to support Squirrel Monkey Haven. Thank you very much.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. Michael, were you the one that prepared this report, or you're separate and apart from this?
No, I'm independent of that report. Okay.
And Don Clonch, Lauren Hemingway, and Sharon Cardiff.
Yes, I did fill out a request to speak.
Yes, that one I have.
I have been sworn in.
Okay, good.
And, in viewing this, I'm in favor of the appeal for one thing, but in viewing this, it looks to me like we're kind of overlooking the issue here. I mean, everybody is kind of going on this sympathy for the monkeys, which there isn't a person in this room that doesn't feel indebted to those animals. And we all want them to have a good retirement plan, or place to be. But in this case here, it's just the wrong location. One thing that hasn't been addressed here is that is in a floodplain, that location. And that should be considered. So that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you very much. Lauren Hemingway, Sharon Cardiff, and then Sue Buckmaster.
Yeah, I've been sworn.
State your name for the record.
Oh, Lauren Hemingway.
Great, thank you.
And I live right straight across from it, and I'll be looking at it every day. I have no problems with it.
Okay, so you support the application?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sharon? Then Sue Buckmaster and Linda Mowry.
I just want to say I support it. And I think the world's getting smaller.
I'm sorry, you support the application or the appeal?
Supporting the application.
Okay.
I think the world's getting smaller, animals need care, and I think we need to step up and take care of animals.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sue Buckmaster, Linda Mowry, and John Porter. And because this is confusing and almost everyone's filled this out incorrectly, tell me whether you support the application or the appeal, if you would.
I support the application. My name is Susan Buckmaster, and I live on the property. There was an article recently in a local Galt newsletter or newspaper, and it indicated that our district supervisor is going to run again for office in the upcoming election, and that in part it was because he wanted to make sure there was continual growth for the agricultural area and safe growth. We live across from a neighbor who has horses. There is a little goat farm not far away, the short distance down the road. There's also a huge fish farm, and then of course there's the cattle and the dairy farms that are around us. And so there is quite a diverse group of animals there in that area. It's very open space. And as you noted in the presentation, the picture presentation, there's quite a bit of distance from the back area of this property. And behind it is a huge orchard, and then also a big vineyard. And so I'm looking at this in the perspective of location of where the animal sanctuary will be, as well as the diversity of animals in the area. And I'd like to speak just on that behalf.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Linda Mowry, John Porter, and Chris Shipman.
My name is Linda Mowry, and I have been sworn.
Great.
I am here just to support the applicants, and I feel that it's a wonderful, wonderful project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John Porter, Chris Shipman, and then Norm Mowry.
My name is Jonathan Porter. I have been sworn in, and I am a local area resident, and I support Squirrel Monkey Haven. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Chris Shipman, Norm Mowry, and George Bryant.
Chris Shipman had the lead.
Who did?
Chris.
Okay. Then Norm, it's your turn.
I'm Norm Mowry, and I have been sworn. I'm a pastor in Galt, and I totally support the application for this project. I think it's just basic for humankind to care for all of God's creatures. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. George Bryant, Walt Buttmaster, and Tracy Starkey.
Yes, my name is George Bryant, and I have been sworn. I've been a resident of California since the late 70s and a resident of Galt for 11 years. We know the applicants and have been and visited the site. I think it's an awesome project, and I think it's very commendable that they have been in research for you and I and have used the monkeys in their research, and now they want to let them live out their natural life. I support the project.
Thank you. George. Mr. Buckmaster, Tracy Starkey, and Melissa, not sure, on Hunterstown Place.
My name's Walt Buckmaster, and yes, I've been sworn. Yes, I'm the proud father of Paul. To start off, get that out of the way so everybody knows. When we started the process almost a year ago, the fellow that ran the CPAC meeting said there's three real primary things you have to look at on any development. One was site. This project is going to be an agriculture building with a lot of landscaping around it. If anybody wants to see the monkeys, they're going to have to come in for a tour. They won't get in any other way. The second one was noise. The analysis they've done, that has been done for the county, shows that it's well below any requirements as far as noise. These are small animals. The third is smell. The 51 squirrel monkeys they presently have produce less waste than 2 medium-sized dogs. There's not going to be a smell issue. If the monkeys were on the property today, after the construction's done, there would be, none of the neighbors would be affected any way, shape, or form. So I do support the project.
Thank you, Mr. Buckmaster. Tracy Starkey, Melissa, and then Diane Pierce.
Good afternoon. My name is Tracy Starkey. I am in support of Squirrel Monkey Haven. My comment, aside from the support of this wonderful plan, is a comment for calling this, comparing it to a zoo. Last time I checked, a zoo was used to house multiple different types of wild animals, and it was purpose was for people to come and look at them. And my understanding of this project is that is not going to occur. It is not a zoo. It's a sanctuary for retired research monkeys. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa? Then Diana Pierce and Maya Gognan.
Hi, I'm Melissa, and I've been
What's your last
sworn-
name, Melissa?
Lori. Melissa Lori.
Okay.
As a community member and a experienced primate caretaker at the Conservation Society of California's Oakland Zoo, I am absolutely in support of the application of Squirrel Monkey Haven. And with over 100,000 monkeys, and that's a rough number, that are in research today, I think it's absolutely important that places like Squirrel Monkey Haven exist so that when these monkeys are eligible for retirement, they actually have somewhere to go and live out their lives peacefully instead of being sold back into research or euthanized. I think that the community, based on some of the things that I've heard today, could greatly benefit from the education that this facility will bring. And just to touch on the point of the noise, is I work with 12 squirrel monkeys and 7 chimpanzees, and I mean, you should really look up YouTube videos of squirrel monkeys. They're very quiet. They're not screaming in your face like the chimpanzees would. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Diana Pierce, then Maya, and then Michael Cardiff.
My name is Diana Pierce, and I have been sworn.
Thank you.
I appreciate all of the education that I'm getting through this in support of the sanctuary. But I'd like to talk about some things that have come up. And one of the things was smell and clay. I lived in Winters, California, and in Vacaville, I raised horses, and we had clay. I had show horses that were kept in a barn. We used adequate amount of bedding, and every day we would rake the good bedding aside, and you would have wet, moist bedding that you would remove. And there was some dampness to the ground below it, the dirt itself. But when you're cleaning every day, that never penetrates below a few inches. And this is a horse that urinates volumes. Okay. And we're going to talk about a flood area, and you're going to talk about dairies, and you're going to talk about livestock that are out in the fields with no cleaning measures. That, if you want to make it an issue, is throughout the county, not in an enclosed environment with bedding that is going to be cleaned daily. That's the first thing. We talk about noise, and I think that can be very objective. There's an adjacent property that has dogs that run up and down a fence line that bark constantly. That doesn't seem to bother the people who live there. That can be objective. These are little monkeys that are going to coo like little birds. But people object. Well, first, I think change is hard for people. Then I think there's a level of fear, which I think has been addressed. And you've got some professional people that are putting some concerns to rest. But then you have a fact that I don't like this and I want to control it. And I don't think we can go forth in life for people to say no. I think we need to be educated. I think we need to come together as a community and see that this will be very beneficial in the way of jobs.
Could you wind up your comments, please?
Pardon me?
Could you wind up your comments,
yes.
please?
That's basically what I wanted to say, and I really want to say I support this project.
Okay, thank you very much. Maya Gogwin.
Hi, my name is Maya Gogan, and I support Squirrel Monkey Haven. Oh, I have been sworn, yes. Okay. So I just wanted to say I am a primate keeper at the California Conservation Society's Oakland Zoo, and I support what Melissa said. But I think it's really important that we have a facility like Squirrel Monkey Haven that it's designed properly to house these squirrel monkeys after they're put into retirement. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Michael Cardiff, then Jessica Hardy, and Julia Berg.
My name is Michael Cardiff, and I have been sworn. And I support the vision and passion that Chris and Paul have for this project and the many others that have been involved in it. And I just want to let you know I do support the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jessica Hardy, and Julia Berg, and Martin Carrillo.
Hi, I'm Jess Hardy. I've been sworn. I am an experienced primate keeper in a sanctuary setting, particularly with squirrel monkeys. I support Squirrel Monkey Haven and other animal sanctuaries in the Sacramento area. Monkey retirement is a positive thing for the community. The sanctuary will provide jobs for the area, and the sanctuary could provide promotional opportunity for local businesses and organizations. There are 70,000 monkeys being used in research right now. Another 40,000 are being detained. The 100,000 plus monkeys in research will be euthanized if sanctuaries aren't provided. Monkey research is something everyone in this room has benefited from, and monkey sanctuaries are a societal debt we should absolutely comply with. Thank you.
Thank you. Julia Berg, Martin Garillo. Sonia Pauley.
I'm Julia Berg, and I have been sworn. I am for the applicant, and I think the County of Sacramento and the City of Galt should be proud that the quality and the professionalism for the sanctuary is being established for these monkeys.
Thank you very much. Martin? Then Sonia Pauley, then Melanie Pahoda.
Hi, I'm Mark Carrillo, and I support the appeal. Okay, basically I got a place right down the road. Did we get mixed up? Maybe I filled out the
I just didn't hit, you support the what?
Appeal.
The appeal.
The appeal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I support the appeal.
Right.
Okay. Alrighty. I have a place right down the road. As a homeowner, I am concerned about this project. I have nothing against these monkeys. They have done their duty, and they do need a place to be housed. I think, like the other gentleman said, it is the wrong place at the time. There's too many unknowns about the project, whether it's noise. You can read research. When the monkeys get excited, they can get noisy. Another thing, they are omnivorous. They don't just eat insects. So if they were to go out of their, when they're outside, they can eat lizards and everything else, which may involve some of the other species out there that can be harmed. Furthermore, I didn't quite hear what the attorney said. He said 100 pounds of feces. Is that a day or a month?
No,
when he was speaking.
Martin, what he said is that all total of 51 monkeys is about 100 pounds of mass. That's what he was saying. He didn't say that it had nothing to do with the feces.
Okay.
That's so.
Okay. Well, I'm just wondering because there's a lot of basically in ag, as we know, we have regulations against dealing with manure and nitrogen. So that is a concern. 55 monkeys. And how it accumulates and runoff and such when they're outside. There is a vineyard next door to this place, so that'd be a concern on runoff with manure and such. Basically, I am concerned as a homeowner, and I do support the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sonia? Then Melanie Pahoda and Tish Espinosa.
My name is Sonia Pauley, and I've been sworn, and I have some documents here. Exhibit F. I just went through some of the documents that were listed on the computer, what they had originally, how they were going to do outdoor habitats, and Cal Waste was going to recover the droppings of the animals. I work for the state of California. I'm a health and safety coordinator, and I work with OSHA. And actually, per the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries, this is an actual hazardous waste material. They state that it's hazardous material, or the method for disposal of sewage, toxic, hazardous material, garbage, primate waste follows as all the guidelines for hazardous material waste. You can't just take it to a garbage can and dump it because it doesn't follow the California state law rules for, it's a hazardous waste. I love the monkeys. I think they're precious. I would not want them living next door to me. You know, I think that they should find a spot that's larger. I do think they owe them a debt to society because I think that they've kept them in cages, but I think that it's not the people that live there's, you know, I don't think that they should have to pay the price for what they've done. I don't. But I do know that they are, it is hazardous waste. That's just the law. So that would have to be changed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Melanie Pahoda, Tish Espinoza, then Jeremy Edwards.
Hi, I'm Melanie Pahoda, and I've been sworn. My biggest concern with this is permitting it as a kennel. It clearly, by everyone's comments, this is a sanctuary. It's not a kennel. And so I think that we need to look at that definition a little bit better. I don't think it falls in it. I think 5 acres for such a project is unreasonable. I think when they compare to Paws, that's great, but Paws is 30 acres. As the community moved in, because Paws has been out there for decades, as the community moved in, Paws is moving out. It's too close for the neighbors, so I think that should be considered as well. So I am in support of the appeal.
Thank you very much. Tish, then Jeremy Edwards and Wes Sears, who at the moment, Wes Sears is the last person I have signed up to speak, so please get your card in if you wanted to speak. Okay,
Hi, my name is Tish Espinosa, and I have been sworn.
Thank you.
I am an agriculture and biological consultant in the Herald area. I work all up and down the Central Valley, and I live in Herald, and I've got serious concerns about the initial study that has been presented to us. You're talking about groundwater, you're talking about agriculture, and all of this is kind of less than significant. Well, I see it as really significant. We are on heavy clay soils. All of our soils in that area are heavy clay with plow pans under them, hard pans. We retain a lot of water. The drainage pattern of that property there flows to the west. We have Laguna Creek that just sits right down the road from there. All that flow goes through the ditches that are around that property, the roadside ditches. They go in through the ponds just south of that site and down in through the vineyard and directly into Laguna Creek. I work for the vineyard guy that works there. I've done his sediment erosion control plans, and we have some serious issues about the shit that's going to be coming down those. I have them talking about the dairies. I do a lot of permitting for the dairies. We have serious permitting projects we have to do for manure, for groundwater, to store our shavings, to store our bedding, for all of that. We have serious permits we have to follow, and I just don't see them being addressed here with this Monkey Haven. I completely see none of this being addressed where they're talking about the mulch outside that is going to get wet when it rains. We all know we've got mulch in our gardens. What does it do when it gets wet and we have so much water? It floats. Where's it going to do? It's going to float right on over to the roadside ditch, off-site, wherever it may go. That's just the way it happens. That's how it happens in Herald. We have a lot of rain when it comes down, and it floats.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tish. Jeremy Edwards, then Wes Sears.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeremy Edwards, and I have been sworn.
Great.
And I have lived next door to Zena and Dawn for many years, just west of them. And I feel the people that live in the community are more relevant to this issue. And it's upsetting to me that all of these people that have spoke here today were not at the first meeting in Herald at CPAC. And there were only 4 members there, not 6. And that was upsetting to me also. Also, it was upsetting to me when we had the second CPAC meeting, we were not told of the change of time. And I thought that was a violation of our rights. And I also feel that now that these people show up today is irrelevant, except one gentleman that lives across the street from the Buckmasters. I respect his testimony, but not the others. And the other thing that I have dichotomy with is, as a teacher myself, I can't understand how the Buckmasters want and desire to bring in this business of monkeys sanctuary in our community, and they're not living in the community. They're not there. I don't see them. And they're on the faculty of Stanford University. I feel this is a big issue. When you're running something like this, you need to be a resident in-house. And the other thing that's upsetting to me is that no one has spoke to the issue of Western Nile virus that has killed many animals in the area. I've lost a couple of horses myself. There's a mutated form now in Sacramento County of Western Nile that is also attacking animals. And also at issue that they had up on the screen, the water is at issue. Just a year ago, my well went dry. And my pump person, Robert Nix, told me that their well went dry on their property about 3 years ago. And that should have been disclosed to them when they bought the property. And I oppose.
Could you wind up your comments, sir?
Pardon me?
Could you wind up your comments, please?
Yes. I feel this should be appealed, and the people in the community are the ones that are relevant, that are being affected by this, and especially in property values. And if they owned a 5-acre ranch there, I'm sure they would feel differently. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you. Wes Sears?
Good evening. My name is Wes Sears. I have been sworn. My wife, Brittany, and I live at 11807, which is 3 doors down from the Buckmasters. They seem like great people. We're very proud of our area, our neighborhood. We've worked very hard for it. It's a safe, lovely place. She's with the fire department. I'm an officer with local law enforcement. We don't feel that 5 acres is adequate enough. I understand that everything is zoo quality, but shouldn't zoo quality be on more like PAWS, which is 20 or 30 acres, whatever it is? We're for it. The monkeys, that's a great thing that they're doing for it. We just don't feel that it's adequate on our level, which is only 5 acres. So if we're up for the denial of it. So we appreciate the time that you guys have given us, and
thanks, Wes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to speak? Okay, Mr. Mooney.
Thank you. We'll just take a few minutes for some reply. I just wanted to point out that the definition we talked about before, the chapter 7.3, and it's the definition, it's the last sentence that they're relying upon, which is small animal boarding and training. It's the definition for that term. Ms. Buckmeister's testimony indicated that there will be no training. The animals are free to do what they want during the day. It simply does not meet the definition as an allowable use. What they're doing is admirable. Nobody disputes that. I think it's a great thing that they're doing. It's just not the appropriate location, and the zoning code does not allow it. The zoning code doesn't contemplate it, a wildlife sanctuary in this location. And Diane Moore has a brief comment as a part of our rebuttal, as our reply, and Zena Klonch has maybe about 30 seconds.
Thank you.
I wanted to just repeat, I'm not sure the other biologists, I wanted to respond to a comment that he made, is that we need to not just focus on the one pond on the site. We realize that that's not necessarily, the only place that salamanders could breed in this area. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's guidelines for assessing whether or not a project may impact the species specifically requires an analysis of all aquatic features within 1.24 miles of the site. That hasn't been done. So I just want to make it clear that I think that there's a much larger concern for tiger salamanders breeding in some of these off-site ponds in very close proximity, which are quite suitable to come onto the site. I live in a neighborhood of 10-acre parcels, and there's lots of ponds, and there's salamanders that march across the road. So it's not impossible at all that they could be there, and it's not impossible at all that they could be living underground on the site. Thank you.
Interesting picture of salamanders marching across the road.
Yes.
Thank you. This is Zena Conch. Thank you very much for listening. And
could you identify yourself again, please?
I'm Zena Conch. Great. And I've been sworn. We're not opposed to negotiating we obviously don't want this, and for various reasons that we've told you, but we're not opposed to, I know she has this love of this one troop of monkeys. Can we weed it down, and then she can have her 5 or 10? It just seems more reasonable for an area that we live in, 5-acre parcels, agricultural, residential. So I just appreciate your time and your thoughtfulness on your decision here.
Thank you. You finished? Okay, thank you. Okay. Question time for staff. I'm sorry, Mr. Cerna?
Just a procedural matter. Do we have to formally close the public hearing?
I don't think it said that here. It said deny the...
Okay. Yeah. I'll make sure.
So, questions for staff, which I have. It talks about 51 monkeys. Are they already on site, or are they somewhere else?
They are not on site. I do not know where they are right now, but they are not on site.
Okay. And then what are in our code, what's the difference between a kennel and a sanctuary, the conditions?
Well, we have determined that
That microphone doesn't work either.
We have determined that it's similar to a kennel. I don't think we have
I saw that in the staff report, but...
Yeah, I don't think we have a definition for a sanctuary.
Do we not?
I don't believe we do. I mean, I'm quite comfortable as the planning director that the determination we made that this is a kennel is quite appropriate. However, above and beyond that, the zoning code in section 3.2.4.a does allow the planning director to determine if a use is not expressly listed in the tables. It allows the planning director to determine that a use is substantially similar in characteristics, intensity, and compatibility to a use or uses within the zoning district applicable to the property. So there is some leeway for the planning director to determine if, sometimes, we have a lot of line items, but not everything is exactly in that line item. So I'm quite comfortable with the determination we made that this use is appropriate as a kennel. And there is some leeway in the zoning code around that.
A follow-up to that is, what was the definition of what PAWS had, recognizing they were a much larger facility, and it was a long time ago, so it may not have a correlation?
I do not believe that we required a use permit for PAWS.
No.
Oh, really?
I'm not sure why or how we reached that conclusion at that point in time, but I don't believe, and Mr. Natoli might know as well as me, I do not believe we triggered a use permit for PAWS.
Okay.
There was no use permit.
And if I understand the conditional use permit, we could limit the amount, we could come up with any limit we agreed on for the number of monkeys.
The use permit is entirely discretionary. This hearing is de novo, and the board can change the conditions at your discretion, including a limit on number of monkeys.
Mr. Natoli?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions I wanted to, maybe after people get a chance to ask questions, to offer some thoughts after hearing testimony today, and I think certainly inquiries by board members, but also all the members of the audience who spoke. I want to be clear, Leanne, because when I asked about it very early in the hearing, and it's only relevant to kind of what's coming to us, not so much that I want to get into the depth of any conditions, because I think that predetermines kind of where we're headed. But I want to know, as related to the noise curtain, you stated pretty clearly that was coming forward, that is what was described, and I just want to be clear, because Mr. Adfas saw it differently on behalf of his client. I just want to be clear.
Yes, so when we did the CEQA document, the acoustical curtain was part of the CEQA project description, and it was in the noise study that was submitted. So from planning's perspective, the noise curtain is part of the project description.
Okay.
And is required.
That's an important clarification.
So whether we need to revisit that or not, but yes.
Yeah, I'm not going that far yet. I just wanted to ask. And the other question I wanted to ask, maybe Dave Dickinson. Dave, if you just come up just for a second. Again, I know you haven't been too involved in this. Appreciate your presence here today, and certainly I know that you have familiarity, obviously, with PAWS, but also with other exotic animal permits that may come to us, whether they're singular animals or some other, numbers. My recollection is, and I think Leanne stated, there was no use permit for PAWS, but you certainly they had a permit through you folks to do that, and likewise, any other animal sanctuary or kennel, however it's described, would require that if they had certain types of animals beyond cats and dogs and farm animals. Is that right?
Yes, correct. PAWS is not your typical dog kennel situation. They have had wild animals out there over the years, and they have purchased what is called a kennel permit every year for the last 18 years that I know of.
Through animal care. Different than
yes.
the land use permit, it's basically an animal care regulation permit.
Yeah, they've had a kennel permit for their facility for 18 years that I know of.
Yeah, and what does that entail, Dave? I'm just curious. That wasn't described in any detail here. So what, because it may be applicable to what's being talked about here. But what is that?
The kennel permit?
Yes.
I mean, that's just when we would go out for wild animals. Typically, it's been for hybrid wolves or snakes longer than 6 feet. We just go out and make sure that they have proper habitat for them in confinement areas, and that they know how to take care of the animal properly. And as long as there's no threat to human safety or public health, we'll allow them to get a permit.
What's the range of animals you get under that? Again, they're not in multiples, but typically, do you get tigers and lions?
No. Right now, the only Only the kennel permits we have are for dogs. The wild animal permits, we don't have anything on file right now except for Paws.
So Paws has a wild animal and a kennel permit?
It's a kennel permit that they have to purchase in order to have their facility out there.
So are they separate permits? Is the wild animal and kennel permit one and the same, or are they two different?
No, you get the wild animal permit, but on paper it's called a kennel.
Okay. Okay.
We don't have anything that says a sanctuary permit or anything like that.
Okay. And in the event that a use for that's being requested here today were be permitted, you could be the repository for medical and or historical information for wild animals. I mean,
yes.
For these,
we keep that stuff on file. Yeah.
Okay, and it's something that the public wanted to see. They could make arrangements to see it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's all I needed as far as questions.
Okay, I don't have anyone else on the board that has any questions, Don.
Okay.
What would you like to do?
All right. Well, let me offer a few thoughts and then a suggestion for kind of where we're at today. And I do want to thank everyone who's weighed in. I've had the opportunity on several occasions to talk with a number of folks in this room, certainly the appellants and the applicants, Ms. Clonch and Ms. Moore, and certainly the Buckmasters. And I think both parties, the applicants and appellants, are represented by very capable legal counsel. They've gotten advice, obviously, from biological consultants that I think have, the credentials to certainly weigh in and do some further examination of what the work the county did. I guess to kind of frame this, that certainly it is a land use matter. I mean, there's a lot of emotion that comes behind it, obviously, because of where people live, make their homes, where folks would like to live, where they like to have the requested use to give housing to and refuge to the monkeys, and yet I think we do take into consideration a variety of input here, and I think it was all relevant, related to what people think, and that's part of why you have public hearings, is to hear from folks about that. It's not a common request, obviously. As we discussed about here, we have one other existing facility in the county that at least is known to us, and that being the Paws facility, which certainly is in the same general vicinity. I want to also say, too, that as I kind of said, this is a land use matter, but it certainly has all the various human emotions around it, and whether it's concern for the welfare of the monkeys or concern for members of their family, what it means to neighborhood impacts, and what it might mean if it didn't happen as it relates to the future of the monkeys. And so I get that to the degree that I certainly can have some empathy for it. And I'm familiar with the neighborhood. I think folks know that. I've certainly traveled down that street and have lived in the general area for all my life. I think that the other thing that kind of frames this is, there's certainly been a good deal of scrutiny around it. It comes with a staff recommendation. I think Leanne certainly did a good job of describing that in brief. The advisory council weighed in on 2 occasions. Obviously, that recommendation, we had the zoning administrator, which was the first public hearing, obviously the appeal that brings it here today to us. But I guess underlying all that, what I do hear, certainly I hear clear opposition that there are folks that would just as well, maybe with empathy for the welfare of the animals that would be housed here, that would just as soon not see it here, and you might see it as being better located somewhere else. And then obviously we've heard from many folks who either know the Buckmasters or certainly are in the area of care and keeping of animals that have spoken here today, and certainly are very supportive of it. I guess with that all being said, I guess where I think we might be best served today as a board in trying to deliberate this is that I think with some of the new recently received information, but also I think with some of the suggestions that the neighbors and the appellants have brought forward, that again doesn't concede that they support the request, but I think certainly would like us to entertain some additional mitigations and items that could address at least their concerns, if in fact this board were inclined to approve it moving forward. But I think the specter of if this board were to act from either perspective, that there are, again, very capable counsels on both sides that would have to weigh what this board action would mean, and obviously would then have to seek recourse through the courts if that's what they chose to do. I don't know if that's ever going to be avoided. On the other hand, I guess I would like to offer, and again, with councils here for both the parties, and I've certainly spoken to Krista at least very briefly, but the opportunity to take a brief pause, P-A-U-S-E, on this to have not just opposing councils, but have our county council involved, but certainly have biologists that are qualified on both sides with our county staff that may not be have those same certifications, but certainly have good expertise in that area. And to, if people are willing to come to the table, to have a further conversation. Again, I recognize that's people's time. It doesn't necessarily mean people are going to agree. And I'm certainly not a miracle worker. I'm a representative, and I try to do my best to sort through things like this. But I guess I would lean upon a little bit of my experience in this, and what I've heard from folks here today, and certainly in my conversations with the parties of interest here, to see where we might land on something, and again, to maybe take a couple of weeks, if not a few, and if people are willing, we could convene it right here in the county building, get a room that's big enough to accommodate representatives from the neighborhood. I think they've been very clear about their concerns, and they have capable counsel. Likewise, the Buckmasters and the applicant and their counsel, and then have appropriate county staff there, and have a further discussion. And then obviously it rests with us, but as it relates to the environmental documentation, I think certainly the points have been raised. We have the ability, as Krista described earlier, to act, to make the findings, but I think that the threshold, I think Mr. Mooney certainly made it very clear, and it's been in the communication we've seen, and councils might differ, but there is not a real high threshold. There has to be some proof if you're going to go off and challenge the county's decision, but it requires delay. It will require more money, more time, and I don't know that serves anyone's interest, but that may be what ultimately is the outcome here if the board makes a certain determination. But I'd like to take the opportunity, again, if people are willing, and I would want to hear from the councils from both the parties, to convene a meeting with representative parties to see where there might be common ground and where there's not. And again, it may be very clear, certainly it's going to rest with this board. It's not that I'm making the decision, but I would like to offer that if people are interested, because I think there's been enough questions, enough late arriving information that would allow us maybe to have a fruitful conversation. Again, I'm not going to make any preconceived notions about what it might put forth as far as any conclusions from neighbors and or the applicant, but I would like to have the opportunity to do that. So I guess I'd like to hear from Mr. Moody and Mr. Avis on behalf of their clients. If you need time to caucus at all, but that's fine. I mean, that's I want to know that. I think it may serve everybody's interest here.
Mr. Natoli, I appreciate your leadership on this issue. Certainly the opportunity to discuss this matter further to avoid litigation certainly would be preferable. I mean, we're resolved, obviously, to litigate this matter if necessary, but if we can do something, obviously, far short of that, we'd certainly be interested in exploring that possibility.
Thanks, Nick. Don?
And the Clanches, the appellants, they're also very supportive of that. It makes sense. If we ended up in litigation, we'd have a settlement conference in 45 days. So we'd be doing the same thing. So in some ways, this is trying to put that on the front end as opposed to the back end.
Okay. Well, again, I think we got clear minds, cool heads here, and respectful disagreements on some matters. But so, I ask you, Krista, would that be something that, from county council's perspective, you could participate in as well, so that we can? And it's not just about the legal part of it; it's about certainly the impacts and the elements that are involved in this application. So if we continue this, I don't know. It may take a little bit to get people together. We have a couple of dates we can look to continue to that are fairly.
We have Wednesday, May 23rd, that we had for a potential board meeting. We could do it.
Okay, and then the next board meeting after that, would be what?
It's budget. It'll go all the way to June 19th.
Okay, maybe I can ask, if I could, Madam Chair, just take liberty, maybe have Mr. Mooney and Mr. Avis just come again. It sounds like we have a date where we could continue this for a couple of weeks. That may be preferable for some, but again, it may not allow the opportunity that we need to actually focus on this. I guess then it would probably be the 19th of June. That would be the next, so it would either be the 23rd of May or 19th of June.
I think everybody's pretty interested in getting an answer to this. It seems like the 23rd it's 2 weeks.
Okay.
Plenty of time. I will make this a priority, certainly. So,
okay. Yeah. Don, what's your sense?
Same. The 23rd is that's when you're talking about.
That's when we come back to the board. The board would come back. We have to schedule a meeting before then, and we'll have to work with all the parties here and have. Okay.
Yeah. Fortunately, I had a trial canceled yesterday. That was for next week. So. I've got a lot of time next week.
Okay, all right, well then, Madam...
Your office going to call them and...
Yes, we'll have to
meeting?
make the appropriate arrangements, so we'll work through Mr. Mooney or the Clounches and through Mr. Avis and Buckmasters, and then obviously with county staff, Leanne, we'll need you and Dave and others to assist. We'll get one of the meeting rooms here, and so I would move, we're looking for afternoon meeting. I think it's better
Afternoon,
for
2 p.m.
Okay.
2 p.m. on the 23rd would be the board hearing, so you
Board
would
hearing.
need to have your agreement,
well,
your settlement conference, if you will,
Yeah, I
with a
don't know if we're
small
going to have an
s.
agreement, but we're going to work at it. So, okay, so my motion is to continue this matter until May 23rd at 2 p.m., and in the intervening time, we will make arrangements to meet with folks and spend some time, see if we can't, get us to a spot that's closer. I don't know. So, okay.
Second.
Awesome. Please vote. Thank you all for being here today.
Unanimous
It
vote.
was an
Thank you
interesting
all. Travel
conversation.
safe, and we'll see you in a couple weeks or sooner.
Okay, we're still having a meeting, so if you could take your conversations outside, appreciate it. Thank you. Leanne, if you could help me with that, ask people to move out. Thank you. Okay, next item, please.
Item 56 is your appointments from your own ranks to the Cal ID RAND Board.
Does this require a vote?
Yep.
Yes, please. If you recall, the last time we talked about this was on January 25th, 2018, and at this time you need to appoint an alternate.
Okay.
I understand Matt would like to serve.
You can move
as
Matt Hedges? Okay. Second the motion, please vote.
Okay.
Unanimous vote. And then our next item, item 57, is your nominations. You are continuing to May 22nd, the Antelope Community Planning Advisory Council, Fair Oaks Community Planning Advisory Council, continuing to July 17th, the Cemetery Advisory Commission, Consumnes Area Community Planning Advisory Commission, the County Service Area 4B Slough House, Wilton, Consumnes, County Service Area 4C Delta, Delta Citizens Municipal Advisory Council, Developmental Disabilities Planning and Advisory Council, Human Services Coordinating Council, In-Home Supportive Services Advisory Committee, Local Child Care Planning and Development Council, Paratransit Incorporated, Southeast Area Community Planning Advisory Council, and the Vineyard Area Community Planning Advisory Council. And for your matters today, we have the Arden Arcade Community Planning Advisory Council. Ms. Peters?
I'd like to nominate Steve Turner to the Arden Arcade CPAC and request the process be waived.
Second.
Thank you. Please vote.
Unanimous vote. Children's Coalition,
I have please continue to May 22nd.
County Bicycle Advisory Committee,
The Chiefs recommend nominating Catherine Maroka to the Bicycle Advisory Committee and continue the remainder to June 19th.
Fair Oaks Cemetery District,
I'd like to reappoint Carolyn Flood and nominate Albert Neufeld to the Cemetery District.
Natomas Community Planning Advisory Council, Mr. Cerna.
I don't have my sheet in front of me. I'm going to continue to the 22nd.
Okay. I have notes if you'd like.
It says June
Okay.
19th here.
Okay. Then whatever the notes say.
It says that you were going to appoint Tyler Hickey and waive the process.
Are you sure?
What is it?
That you were appointing Tyler Hickey and waiving the process.
Okay.
Oh.
That.
Unanimous
Make sure you
vote.
get those notes straight, Flo, because you don't know.
Rio Linda Alberta Community Planning Advisory Council, Mr. Cerna.
Whatever the notes say.
I'm sorry, continue to June 19th, and then Ms. Frost.
I have continued to May 22 for mine.
Correct. Sacramento County Alcohol and Drug Advisory Board, Ms.
Continue to
Peters.
May 22nd.
South Sacramento Area Community Planning Advisory Council, Mr. Kennedy.
Nominate Stephanie Upchurch and waive the process.
Second. Please vote.
Unanimous vote.
Continue the remainder.
I'm going to remainder till June 19th.
Veterans Advisory Commission, Mr. Kennedy.
Nominate Tobin Hewitt.
Okay.
1, 3, 4, and 5 continue to May 22nd.
Yeah, we got
Correct.
interviews to do, yeah.
And that concludes your nominations.
Okay. Mr. County Executive, have any comments?
Nope.
Supervisor comments? Mr. Cerna?
Just real briefly, just another reminder that this Thursday at 5:30 in these chambers, we will have the 2018 DHS Scholarship Award Ceremony, and certainly encourage my colleagues to attend if your schedule permits. It's always a very rewarding evening to see so many families and young people throughout the county receive their assistance with their collegiate endeavor. So looking forward to that.
And thank you for raising over $50,000 for the scholarship program, you and your
Yeah, it was a good day.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Does that complete our business, Madam Clerk?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Meeting's adjourned.